I'd like to point out some suggestions for what I think is a brighter future based on my own personal life experience. I was attacked by my ex and by mass murdering doctors and nurses, sex offending cops, um, pervasive corruption basically in our American culture now is obviously life threatening. Now it's been a problem with mankind letting the most evil people rule the world for too long now. The most selfish, the most greedy, in other words, the wealthiest people on earth should not be in power, folks. They're the ones demonstrating the most vice. They're the ones demonstrating, how do you say, the most outright evil against humanity. So the wealthiest people are the ones that need to be arrested this day, folks. I mean, if you want a brighter future, I'm just telling you straight up, you have to arrest the bankers and the wealthiest people on earth at this point for their crimes against humanity. And like I said, speaking from personal experience, uh, I was left um, disabled by the attacks on my life. I married a woman who was so greedy that she tried to murder me for the life insurance in what she thought was a plausibly deniable way, which was by poisoning me. And as I got sicker and sicker in my early 30s after taking out a sizable life insurance policy, I'm just letting you know, um, you have to be careful these days. If you suddenly, right after taking a life insurance policy out, even if it's within a year or two, suddenly start getting sick for no explicable reason, you might think poisoning, because that's what happened to me. I was getting sicker and sicker in my early 30s, despite the fact that I'd been relatively healthy my entire life with no health problems of any kind to speak of. Um, in fact, I was I was so healthy that I used to run up and down mountains literally in Colorado. In other words, I was healthy, and 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 uh, and I was strong. I was fit. I was prior to getting suddenly sick. I was an owner of a small moving company for household and commercial goods, and in which case I was micromanaging it on site. And so most days I was lifting somewhere between 10 and 20 tons of household or commercial goods, sometimes up and down mountainsides and stuff. Um, if you don't think that's something that'll keep you in shape, just try it. Doing that every single day. People talk about a 30-minute workout. I was doing, somewhere between 12 and 16 hours of hard lifting like that every day, and that includes moving like grand pianos and things up and down mountainsides. Um, so I was fit. I was I was healthy. I was strong, and suddenly in my early 30s, man, I started getting really, really sick, and um, because of my size, I didn't think, the bruises I was getting were that inexplicable because my size, I'm used to bumping into things, especially in houses and crammed doorways and small staircases, things like that. So I just thought I must have bumped into something. But unusual bruising, um, and yellowing of the eyes, getting jaundice-like symptoms. You're starting to have hepatic issues. Your liver's being compromised. If you don't drink, and if you're not taking any kind of drugs or anything, and you start developing symptoms like that, think poisoning. I'm sorry I have to mention this. I wished I didn't, but this world is so evil that it's not that uncommon. So I'm just trying to warn people. I'm not trying to make you paranoid. I'm just trying to warn you that you live in a world where greed has gotten so out of control because apparently people are just not realizing that the greediest people on earth are committing crimes against you, us all. Okay, openly. They're committing open crimes against us. They're funding not only the research and development of bioweapons that are a threat to not just other life forms on Earth, but humanity. Those are crimes against humanity. This COVID-19, um, COVID has been researched for decades. They've been altering the genetic strains. There's the patents on all of them, and in order to make them more contagious and more harmful. That Just that alone, anybody and everybody doing that type of work should be under arrest. And if I was in power, they would all be executed, folks. We're talking what they're doing doesn't just threaten, one or two lives, but it threatens billions of us ultimately. Every When I research the patents on and the history of America involved in eugenic fascism and so on and so forth, um, to leave the bankers that are funding it all, the deep state in power, and not arrest them for their crimes against us all, folks, is it's on us for pure stupidity to leave these people loose after what they've done to us. They have been experimenting on the general population. They it, we didn't give them permission to start aerosol spraying our atmosphere. I don't care if they call it stratospheric geoengineering or whatever. The fact is, if you can see aerosol spraying of nanoparticulates in the atmosphere, and you suddenly start having mass die-offs of birds, of fowls all over the world, of plants, of insects, of now I'm not saying that I'm making an error in causation and correlation here. I'm saying that mankind and in all of its poisonous ways, its herbicides, its pesticides, its is threatening life on Earth and ultimately humanity. And it's all in place by the wealthiest people on Earth, folks. Who's in control of manufacturing? Who's in control of genetic engineering and modification and so on and so forth? It's not the poor people, folks. They're not doing these things. It's the wealthiest people on Earth. And for the poor not to unite against them all and arrest them for their crimes against us, it falls on us for what's happening. All this fear mongering through their control of the media. Only six entities control the mainstream media now. So you're not hearing this point of view on the mainstream media, and the public should. We should be arresting the wealthiest people on Earth at this point. There's no way landlords should be legal. Folks, I'm sorry, it should not be legal to own more than one residence. It shouldn't be legal with 7 billion plus people and growing on Earth to own more than one residence so long as there's even one homeless person. Straight up. Shouldn't be legal. Should it be legal for you to walk up to any other citizen and say, pay me X amount of dollars or get out of your home? Beat it. Get on the streets and bring in armed mercenaries to kick you out of your own dwelling? But it is. Tell me that's not assault and even a threat to the person's life getting kicked out into the streets homeless. So right now, bankers and landlords are getting away with overt crimes against humanity, and they've been getting away with it for far too long, folks. This current landlord that just took possession of my own building, I don't know where he's from. I think he's from California. I don't know. I think. But wherever he's from, he thinks that it's okay to buy a building with elderly and disabled people in it and raise the rent in 1 month by 50%. And on one poor soul, he raised it from less than $700 a month all the way up to over $2,000 a month in 1 month. That guy couldn't pay that. So what it is if you can't pay a landlord's demands, and right now there's no laws prohibiting this, as far as I can tell, as far as I know in my research, and there's no laws prohibiting a landlord buying up. In other words, any rich person can buy if you don't own your own home, and and that, even the bankers are under regulations. But can you imagine if the bankers did this? Can you imagine if the bankers said, "We don't care what your mortgage is today. Um, Next month you either pay us, whatever we want, whatever we demand, or get out of your house." But poor tenants are being kicked out of their primary residence and even into the streets to suffer and die, folks. That cannot be legal. It isn't legal. It's immoral, it's unethical, it's unconstitutional, it's absolutely illegal. And the police should not be siding with landlords kicking poor people out of their homes, apartments, whatever, their primary residence. No way, no how. This is what landlords are doing. This is what this landlord did. He bought a building, and he figures he can get out of these apartments because where he's from, rent is so much higher. So he goes to, and this is happening all over America and all over the world, folks. Rich people are looking for any place on earth that they think that they can buy and profit from, regardless of what happens to anybody. Seriously, that doesn't compute. All that computes is their greed, how much money they can make, what they think they can make. So they're buying multiple buildings, multiple properties with poor people in it, poor tenants in poor locations on earth, and they're jacking rents to displace all those people, even if it displaces them into the streets to die. And this guy has already made 2 disabled people, as far as I know, homeless. Or the one guy he raised to 2,000. He was fortunate to find one apartment that he could afford in this area. But if he couldn't, he would have had to leave the entire region. And because not just this landlord is doing it, but so many landlords are so greedy now, and they're so heartless, so cold-blooded that and I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying so many of them are, that they're raising rents on people on fixed income, on Social Security and Social Security disability. They're raising rents, and there's no way those poor people can then save up enough to even move to another place by their being forced to be moved, because they have to meet the landlord's current demands or instantly move. And because the rich are constantly jacking the housing costs on poor people can't save anything. So the rich people are on earth are oppressing the poor people to the point where they're driving them homeless into the streets to suffer and die. And tell me that that's not a crime, folks. That is a crime. And I encourage poor people at this point to stand your ground. I don't know what has to happen. This is what I suggest should happen. That it becomes illegal to own more than one primary residence. You cannot own more than one structure for your own dwelling, and you cannot be a landlord. You can buy commercial property, you can buy hotels, motels, resorts, and so on and so forth. But it has to become an absolute right that everybody has an absolute right to be safe and secure in their own primary residence. In modern civilization, to be out exposed to the elements, homeless, is life-threatening. It used to be that there was so much land and so few people on earth, you could just build your own home wherever, and as long as you built it there first, that was your home, and you defended it against anybody that would try to take it from you. And now it's that we have a modern civilization in which a few people own everything, and the masses own nothing. and it's getting worse. It's this wealth concentration by the greediest people on earth is 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 allowing is allowing the laws to be so perverted. There's no way it's constitutional. It's not. How can that be equal protection? When any citizen, when any one citizen among us in the United States of America, we are protected equally under the Constitution, supposedly. But how is it equal protection if if a wealthy person who buys multiple properties can just walk up to poor people that don't have money, can't pay them, and say, "Pay me or get out. I don't care if you die homeless. I'll call the police and evict you because because you can't pay my greedy demands." In other words, these people from out of state pick poor regions, and then what they do is they raise the cost of housing there to what it is to where they came from. Well, poor people wouldn't be in a poor region if it weren't for the fact that they couldn't afford the housing that those people came from. So they're just driving poor people into the wilderness. When rich people buy up all the housing and jack the rates nationwide, coast to coast, they're driving poor people homeless by their greed. And if every once in a while I have to censor myself, it's because of my rage about this. I was attacked by my wife because of greed, and she wanted the life insurance and our whole estate, and she wanted it now. She didn't want to let me earn, for the next 10, 20 years of my life, far more than that petty life insurance that she tried to kill me for. Now, if she had just been a decent woman, she'd been rich. I was on my way to making millions of dollars, and I'm not lying. That's provable. Um, so I lost my prime earning years, and my estate and everything. Now, how's that right? Somebody tries to kill you and you're left disabled so that you can't work. You might want to, but you're just too sick to work. Even your boss says you're too sick to work. You can't work. That happened to me. Now, I'm not saying that woe's me, I'm the only one that has calamities happen to them. I'm saying that laws have to be changed, that bankers and landlords cannot continue to do this to people. You can't let the wealthiest people get away with killing poor people in the streets, homeless folks. You can't make it. You can't let it be You can't let it be a proper legal procedure for somebody who ends up attacked, injured by crime, injured by war, I don't know, injured in some disaster, um, to be driven out of their home by people that live in palaces. Bankers, folks, are the wealthiest people on earth. If they weren't, they couldn't give mortgages to all the real estate across the country from coast to coast. So the wealthiest people on earth living in palaces themselves are kicking out people that get injured in wars, people that get injured in natural disasters, people that get injured by crime, and to suffer and die. And I'm saying when greed is that bad, um, they should be arrested. They should be arrested. That is an absolute crime against humanity. You, I'm not saying that the bankers should lose their money or investment or return. I'm saying that laws should be passed that anybody that is injured through no fault of their own, becomes chronically ill through no fault of their own, and is disabled and absolutely can't get employment or work or earnings, cannot be driven out of their own home. Just can't. That whatever they're allotted to in disability insurance goes to thereafter to pay a reasonable portion thereof towards whatever their mortgage was, whatever their rent is. And by reasonable, bankers have determined that that's roughly 30% of your net monthly earnings. So if disability is only giving people $1,000 a month to live on, then their housing costs can't be more than $300 a month. And if they were in a home that was, I don't know, 500,000, a million, whatever, you would think wealthy people would have disability insurance, annuities besides Social Security. You would think. But I was just starting to make enough money to have an estate that I needed to protect when I was attacked. I mean, she didn't wait long. As soon as there was some value in our holdings, man, she went for it, and that cost me everything, and I had no protection. And when I went to the police, man, the police, instead of investigating, joined in the crimes against me. Basically had sex with her and let her go free, and let the mass murdering doctors and nurses go free. And when I went to the FBI about all this corruption, um, they threatened me. They threatened me. And it wasn't just they, it was one individual that knew that the cops in this area were that corrupt. And I have been trying to get, higher authorities ever since to investigate and come down on all these people and all these things. And I found out, sadly, that the United States has been involved in eugenic fascism. And it just so happens that there's ties between the eugenic fascists and mass murdering doctors and nurses, illegal organ harvesting, all that, population management. That's all under depopulation agendas. So the wealthiest people are responsible for what happened to me personally. The wealthiest people on earth with their depopulation agendas, with killing people in hospitals and hacking them up for their organs and so on and so forth. Now the wealthiest people on earth, how do you think they live, 90, 100 plus years? A lot of them get organ transplants. And do you think that there's viable organs from just anybody anytime they need? Just by pure accident and chance? No. Hospitals are now profit driven, and so a murdered victim generates millions of dollars of transplant revenue. And I tried to get investigations and arrests because I know that hardly anybody survives hospital homicides. They're dead and hacked up for their organs. So I don't know what I've got to do. If I had been, people say if you're telling the truth, what they did to you would have caused me to go vigilante. And I'm like, it's not like I didn't think of that after I exhausted all channels in our country. I exhausted everything I could think of in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Ain't nobody helped me. I contacted I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of firms of attorneys is an understatement. I think it's in the thousands that I tried to get help, and nobody would help me. So at this point, I'm not going to be silent about this. Under God Almighty, I appeal to the Almighty to intervene um, um, in this type of evil on planet Earth. I want to see it brought to an end. And so I'm encouraging the poor masses to realize that what happened to me could happen to anybody. And to make lawmakers, in other words, if they won't make these laws, remove them and put people in power who will. We've got too many wealthy people making the laws, and to the harm of poor people, to the poor working masses. And there's not equity there, right? There's not equity if a rich person can walk up to any other citizen and say, pay me what I demand, or suffer and die homeless. Or, we don't care if you don't have any money to move. We don't care if you have to sell everything you have, every last possession, because you can't afford to pay somebody to move it. We don't care. We don't care if you suffer and die in the streets. We don't care if you're disabled. This guy has already moved 2 elderly persons out of this place, and it's because of greed. Mark you, it's because of greed. He thinks that he can get, I don't know. Let's say, you're living in an area of generally a poor part of the United States, where right now rents might be under, for a one-bedroom apartment, might be 500, 600, may, they might be a little bit more, 700. They might be a little bit less. They might be 400 or something. But some rich person just gets it in their mind that they've got enough money to buy commercial and residential real estate in your area, and then just displace the entire local population. I'm serious. This is not infeasible, folks. There are millionaires and billionaires, and it's happening. They'll pick a spot and go, man, that's a great spot. I can make a lot of money there. And they'll buy up all the real estate. And then the poor people living there can't own anything, because one rich person owns it all. And so they get it in their head that they can just wait until somebody pays their greedy demands. In the meantime, the poor, the elderly, and disabled lives are under attack. Every time another citizen says, pay me whatever, $50 more a month, $100 more a month, to somebody on fixed income that's just trying to survive under poverty level crushing conditions, like myself, that is an attack on their life. It has to come from somewhere, and a poor person has already whittled down all their expenses to nothing but food. In other words, I don't have a car. I had to get rid of it. I couldn't afford it. I owned the thing, but I couldn't afford the gas for it. I couldn't afford the insurance for it. So even though I owned a vehicle, I had to sell it, just to try to manage on below poverty level income. So folks, if you get injured by war, by crime, by natural disaster, or if you get chronically ill, say hello to crushing poverty and a premature death if you don't have friends or loved ones, anywhere in this world that'll help you out. So our laws have to be changed. Our laws have to be changed to protect victims. There's not, first of all, there's not attorneys that protect poor people, or if there are, there's so few that I couldn't find any. Nobody wanted to take my case based on the contingency that they get paid if we win. Nobody I could find. So that's all just movies, folks. It's not reality. If you don't have money, you don't have legal defense and legal protection in this country. You might have rights afforded you by the Constitution. You might even know what your rights are. But if you don't have money in order to back those in rights in court, the last time I appeared by myself in front of a judge, the judge didn't care that I was indigent, that I was fighting for my life, didn't care I was being ripped off by my whole estate and hundreds of thousands of dollars by just so much corruption. Didn't care. He was like, Mr. Swenson, if I have a health problem, I don't presume, to operate on myself and stuff. I go to a professional. So you shouldn't come into court here without an attorney. I was so flabbergasted by his comment. I couldn't rise to the occasion to say, you think I don't want, professional legal counsel and help? I can't afford it. I'm broke. Nobody would represent me. My wife not only attacked me, and then doctors and nurses tried to finish me off, but sent me home to suffer and die. And while I was laying in bed, she drained all the bank accounts, bought herself a nice home, and left me with nothing. Nothing but a foreclosure notice from the bank. I'm not saying that on paper I didn't get some of our properties, but I was so sick I couldn't defend my interest in them. So corruption in the county where I owned multiple properties caused them to file liens against all my properties while I was trying to sell them desperately under the circumstances. So I lost all those because the county acted illegally. After I had purchased them, I had purchased them with the appurtenant rights of water property rights, which included water and sewer hookups. So I had water and sewer hookups for a small mobile home park. And if I had been healthy enough, I would have filled it out with mobile homes. But my intention was to build affordable housing there, and because I recognized that this area was having too many wealthy people buy all the real estate, and there wasn't enough affordable housing for the poor working locals. So I had bought a small mobile home park with the idea of converting it into a location for affordable housing, and it didn't happen because at the time I was getting ready to develop it, that's when all these attacks on my life occurred. And the county decided to take over water and sewer in that area, and then told me that if I didn't pay them so much per month for all those vacant lots, even though nobody was using water and sewer, because they were vacant lots, that they were going to take all my water and sewer hookups that I had paid for and owned away from me. Now you cannot do that. It's called post de facto. You cannot make a law or commit an act that violates an existing agreement. That in other words, if somebody purchases property with a certain understanding, with a certain agreement, you can't just arbitrarily change that agreement on them. You can't just take their pertinent rights from them. But that's what the county did to me, and in the process filed liens against all those properties, so I couldn't sell them because everybody knew that I was then bankrupt. And in America, when people know you're bankrupt, they think that you're going to lose all your properties and that they can buy it for less than if they just had mercy on your soul and did business with you. But that's what happened to me. So I lost tens of thousands of dollars in real property assets due to the illegal actions of Boundary County, of the city of Bonners Ferry, Idaho. And they were illegal actions. And if I'd had any money, I would have proven that in court. It's absolutely, what they did was totally illegal. And then I had, besides getting attacked by my wife, besides getting attacked by the doctors, besides the cops, instead of investigating, joining in the crimes against me, all this was occurring at the same time. Being ripped off by the county, liens against my properties that shouldn't have been there. I couldn't get them lifted because I couldn't afford to hire an attorney, and I go into court because two partners that I had worked on a development with were refusing to pay me my share, and so I filed a lien in order to get my share upon the sales of the development. And the judge told me, well, you might have a violation of, a contractual agreement or a verbal agreement or something with them, but you can't file a lien on the property. And I had every right to file a lien on the property. I worked on the property. I micromanaged the development of the property, and so I had every legal right to have a lien on that property, and I should have been backed by the damn judge. But again, the judge was all like, Mr. Swanson, patronizing me with his lecture about me coming into court without an attorney, as if I had a choice. And so I got ripped off by $150,000 conservatively there as well. So just greed and corruption in America is life-threatening, folks. You got it. You should, if you can afford it, you should buy yourself disability insurance. You should buy yourself liability insurance if you own any property where the public is accessed, because there's all kinds of people that try to commit insurance fraud, pretend to get injured, and then sue you. And you need insurances for all that, unfortunately, because there's just so much greed and corruption. So in order to have money, in order to make money, you got to try to protect yourself from getting ripped off of your entire estate, like I did. And in order to do that, you have to have all kinds of insurances in place, and you have to have basically some type of retainer. Um, there's general ways to retain firms through group policies. I forget. There's certain types of companies even that are involved in for nominal monthly fees, being able to represent your interest at least initially, and then um, for additional money if it involves being escalated into the court. But you can retain without privately retaining just a single attorney. There's group companies now and firms that partner together across the country that you can, for a nominal fee each month, have yourself modest legal protection if you're not wealthy, but you're on your way. Any rate, um, I had researched risk management. So in other words, I was just getting into it and looking into protecting my interests and assets when all this happened to me and I lost everything. Too much pervasive corruption and not enough people willing to help me at my time of need. And it's not like I didn't try. Like I said, I contacted between hundreds of, conservatively, if not thousands of firms, trying to get anybody and everybody I could, um, any type of legal advice or help while I was losing everything. And nobody came, not one person. You know. At a time like that, you can really think, that either God hates you or that you're going through a Job-like trial. Because when all that happens all at once, including, I'm not even including everything, but while I was losing everything, I had all kinds of strange things happening as a result uh, of discovering that about 10% of the population have a genetic trait that's being, for some reason, suppressed from public knowledge, called Wilson's disease. It's not a disease, it's just a genetic trait. Most of your television personalities, stars, all have this trait. And as far as I can tell, it's not a disease if it's that beneficial that the wealthiest people and the most famous people on earth um, all have the trait. Now, I'm not saying all. I'm not saying that it's universally the wealthiest, fastest, strongest people all have this genetic trait. I'm saying that it's a very high percentage of the Nobel Prize winners, of your TV stars, your movie stars, even your newscasters, anybody on television, models, supermodels, world-class athletes. I would say somewhere between 70 and 80% um, of your best, your world class, like Olympians and so on and so forth, have this genetic trait. So it could be that there's been genetic modification going on with the human genome for who knows how long, or it could be that this genetic trait has been in the population since way back, and that it's grown to about 10% of the population, and that these people tend to rise um, up as the movers and shakers on earth, your world leaders and so on and so forth, all have this genetic trait for the most part. 70 to 80% of them. When I say all, I'm saying the majority of them all have this genetic trait. And now, unfortunately, the so-called experts and doctors don't even know how to recognize this trait. As far as I can tell. I told them flat out, man, I had this trait. I told them that a laboratory technician who majored in being able to identify people with this trait told me I had this trait. and actually do have this trait, and yet um, the vast majority of doctors and nurses I've met don't know diddly about it. In other words, apparently it's not, even though 10% of the population have this, and even though it's connected not just with world-class um, intellectuals, athletes, etc., but also extreme people in extreme sports. A lot of people in extreme sports have this trait. Um, they're risk takers. They're the so it can go good and bad. So some of your worst criminals have this trait, and some of your, like I said, world-class Olympians and superstars have the trait. They're extreme people, but the point being is that probably that's the reason why so few people know about the fact that 10% of the population have this trait. But on a downside, um, people that have this trait are more susceptible to chemicals, heavy metals, toxic poisons. So a lot of them that have this trait will be, how do you say, teachers, professors, um, authors, but then in their latter years they'll develop neurological symptoms, palsies, um, some of them Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancers, and they're more susceptible to the causes of toxins in their systems. So they develop chronic ailments earlier than people that don't have the trait, and it's because their blood is altered somewhat. Rouleau formation, for medical laboratory technicians that know what I'm talking about. If you identify somebody with rouleau formation, you should run tests on them for Wilson's disease and hereditary hemochromatosis as well. Um, in my research, there's a link between the two, and it's that rouleau formation actually that leads to the susceptibility of more toxins in capillaries, and that people with the trait can then later in life develop things like palsies, like I said, chronic ailments, neurologic disorders, strokes, heart attacks. It just they're kind of like a candle that burns at two ends. They're intense people, but they typically develop chronic and terminal conditions sooner. In other words, they have a brighter but shorter lifespan typically. It's not that all of them do. Some of them are so intense and so intelligent that they maintain um, optimum health for themselves, so that they appear to live a relatively healthy life like the general population statistically. But if not, if they don't focus on detoxification and keeping their circulation system in prime running condition, um, then uh, then they tend to die sooner. So they have a real intense life, but a shorter one. At any rate, and if you notice, a lot of Olympians and superstars and world-class athletes and movie stars and so on and so forth just have that. They have these real bright lights that really burn. Hence, we call them stars. But a lot of them die prematurely, don't they? I mean, a significant percentage of them die sooner than the general population, don't they? I mean, do some research on this. I already have. So I know what I'm talking about. Um, some of them accumulate so much wealth that they're able to get the best medical care that then prolong their life, but they develop the chronic conditions I'm talking about sooner, is my point. And if they weren't so wealthy, would die sooner as a result. Me, I'm facing that because I don't have the wealth to, even though I have the knowledge about how to prolong my life for the most part in the natural sense of this world. Um, I don't have the money. I know what I need to do. I know that that all kinds of expensive things would help me. But I don't have the money. So poor people died just it's not that they don't have knowledge, it's not that they're not gifted or talented or so on and so forth. They just die in this world because the rich people have made the best health care such that only they can afford it. In other words, I'm not talking about what insurance companies will cover, folks. Insurance companies are also by rich people that are trying to make a profit. So if you're poor and you're paying for medical insurance, then you're not able to get the best medical care at all. The chances are you're getting absolutely the worst medical care, or not as bad as somebody that doesn't have any money or any insurance at all. But it's definitely not on par with what those wealthy people that own the insurance companies, that are the insurance company, are able to pay for and get. And it's not what the bankers, it's not what the multimillionaires and multi-billionaires are able to pay for and get. There's technology, for instance, if you're burned, there's technology now that they can just spray on new skin so that you don't have any scarring. I mean, severely burned, like burned down to your muscle tissue, burned. There's technology now to genetically replicate new skin. And there's technology that's so good that if that's not burned to the point where you're missing whole patches of skin, but burned to the point where you would have scar tissue burned, that they can just actually spray on medical care that regenerates your tissue to the point where you basically get new skin with no scarring. Now, that's only available, technology like that's only available to the wealthiest people. They might experiment on the general population a little bit to develop that technology. So if you were a poor person and you agreed to be their guinea pig, in which case things might have gone either way for you. Could have gone terrible to the point where they made mistakes and cost you everything, including your life. But then again, it could have been like they were on a breakthrough of a new technology like that, and it actually really helped you. So poor people are experimented on by the rich people, and they just do things like geoengineering without our permission. That's the air we breathe, folks. And when creatures are dying all over this world, fowls are dropping out of the sky, we have to ask ourselves, could it be that it's due to something in the air? And if they say no, if they say those things are not harmful, stick them in a room and pump that room full of that crap that they're spraying, the aerosol that they're spraying in the air. If they say the herbicides and pesticides are not life-threatening to mankind, so on and so forth, tell them chug a lug. Here you go, drink some Roundup. I'm being facetious at this point. I'm trying to say, don't let them lie. Don't let them get away with these crimes against humanity. And for rich people to own so much real estate that poor people can't own any, that is a crime against humanity. In modern civilization, housing is shelter from the elements. And if they try to tell you that it's not life-threatening to kick the poor, elderly, and disabled out in the streets to suffer and die, if they try to tell you that, then kick them out of their homes and make them homeless. What I'm getting at is anybody trying to argue with me? I'm like, I want them to suffer what I've been suffering my whole life. I have been kicked around by rich people my whole life, and I'm tired of it. I was raised in Colorado, at the foothills, the Boulder Valley area, and so many millionaires and multimillionaires moved into that area. I had to move more than 1,000 miles away before I could find anything affordable. And now it's happening here. And I don't have the strength, the health, or the money make that kind of move again. And I'm just dead tired of getting kicked around by rich people. I have had it. I've absolutely had it. And when I was in real estate, I saw it happening to poor people, and I tried my hardest, man. I ran ads at my cost. I'm telling poor people to get into a home, land, home, however they could, as soon as they could, because I saw it coming. And I'm just saying it's got to be illegal. We have to until there's enough housing for everybody on Earth, until everybody absolutely has the absolute right to their own primary residence to be safe and secure from harassment from anyone else. In other words, no citizen can walk up to them and say, pay me X, or beat it, get out on the streets and suffer and die. That's life-threatening, folks. And if you don't think so, then like I said, anybody who doesn't think so, find yourself homeless. Homes not only offer shelter from the elements, but they offer a small amount of security from crime, from the insane, from people that are just desperate. They get so poor and so hungry that they get so desperate that their brain just starts to function in ways that just aren't good. And it's amazing, but homeless gangs will form and prey on other homeless people. Look, man, I have been in the hard places, man. I have seen and experienced how things are in this world, and it's due to the greed at the highest levels, driving people to that. They don't pay honorable wages sufficiently enough for people to even work 40 hours anymore and be able to pay their bills. And B, they own all the real estate, and as a result are thinking they can just charge whatever they want. And some desperate poor person somewhere pays it, so they think it's reasonable. When that poor person is now eating beans or rice, or having to go to food banks to beg for whatever the grocery stores are throwing out, and because it's starting to go bad and stuff. So it's a risk to their health to even get the food at the food bank. I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't let starving, desperate people eat whatever the heck they want. But the point being is I've been to the food banks, and so I've seen plenty of food going bad there, and I mean because I've worked in the industry, I know how to take something like, let's say you've got cases of strawberries, but they're all covered in mold. I know how to wash them, and then B, boil the crap out of them to just make some jams or compotes or whatever to kill any microbes or any bacteria, so on and so forth, mold, etc. So it might taste kind of tainted and stuff, but with enough boiling for long enough, you can pretty much kill all the microbes and probably killing all the nutrients too, but not all. It's still edible, and it'll still give you some energy if you're that desperate. I've been that desperate, so that's why I'm even mentioning it. My point being is that with this COVID thing, they're responsible for developing the COVID strain that's supposedly causing all this pandemic thing in the first place. Wealthiest people on Earth. And B, wealthiest people on Earth own the media. So they're responsible for all this brainwashing going on that's making everybody wear these face masks that are not completely useless, but next to useless. Granted, viruses and microbes do tend to travel on sputum and in other words, contagious diseases and so on and so forth. So if people cough without being polite enough to cough into their armpit or whatever, because you don't want to use your hands, because your hands touch everything. So that's why they say cough like this, because that part of your arm, you're not really touching things. You're not really saying, "Here, shake my armpit," you know. So really, that's the safer way to cover your mouth if you have to cough or sneeze. And but the bottom line is, that's all it's preventing it is if somebody doesn't have the courtesy enough to cover if they cough or sneeze. And and that's something. That's something. But 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 something that is about as deadly as pneumonia or as the flu, or as drunk driving, or as any one of a number of things. Right now, the third leading cause of death in the world is medical malpractice, doctors and nurses. In other words, what doctors and nurses do to their patients causes their patients to die prematurely. You could go in for minor surgery and end up dead. And I'm telling you, one of the reasons why people end up dead prematurely like that is they're hacked up for their organs, and that's murder. And for law enforcement for to allow that to go on is insane, because anybody and everybody can end up in a hospital. And if doctors and nurses think that they can just get away with murder and nobody's going to investigate ever, nobody's going to hold them accountable. Like in my case, I know these people must be connected. For federal agents to threaten me, for me to lose my whole estate, for when I went for medical care to other states, there were people following me, telling them not to give me medical care. In other words, for everything that happened to me personally to happen is a coordinated effort from corruption on high that had to put this crap in place in the first place. Mass murdering doctors and nurses, COVID, all of it. And I'm saying, if you want the pandemics and the crap all to end, I'm not saying that there will be no diseases or no contagions or anything like that, because there've always been throughout history. And in fact, God says, the Almighty says that if you depart from Him, diseases will be multiplied upon you. In other words, you'll suffer and die. In other words, departing from God, who is life, automatically brings suffering and death. So it is foolhardy for anyone to depart from the God of the Holy Bible. Now, you can say that He must be evil then, but show me one of His commandments that are evil. No, everything He asks of us are nothing but good. We're evil. And if He determines that departing from Him necessarily brings suffering in order to cause you to return or to die, then He's determined that becoming evil means that you're going to harm His creation. In other words, you're going to harm other people. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Pervasive corruption caused me to lose my entire estate. If any of the authorities had been decent that I went to, if I could find any attorneys that would represent poor people like they represent rich people, if I could find in this world just decent people, especially in all these places of power and authority, then I wouldn't be in the state I'm in, which is advising poor people all over the world to unite. And if your lawmakers won't make laws that make it illegal to be landlords, I'm serious. Get rid of landlords. How can that be legal? How can that be legal for somebody, anybody, any citizen, to walk up to another citizen for any reason, landlord or otherwise, and say, pay me X amount of dollars or suffer consequences? Because that's landlord. Pay me whatever I want, and they can pick a number out of the air. Pay me $10,000 next month. Now, tenants supposedly have rights, but like I said, a poor person, you do have rights, but can you defend them? In other words, can you, in court, defend yourself against a rich person? It can be done, but it's rare. Most poor people are so stressed out and trying so hard just to live on the planet, man, that they just can't deal with missing work for one day, especially to go to court to challenge some wealthy person that's violating their rights. Now, if you do win, I hope that the courts award you serious compensation, because it's unusual. It's not typical that the poor win against the rich. It's just not typical. Like I said, if you can find an attorney to help you, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a pure miracle if you can. I tried, folks. I tried. I think I even contacted firms out of the country just to let them know that, hey, man, hospital homicides are a very real thing, and if anybody can put an end to them, it's those that are involved with justice. It's also angry citizens that are angry enough of being victimized by rich people to stop taking it, stop putting up with it. But like this guy, two elderly people out of here. Why? Because in his mind, he thinks he can charge, rent that's like so much higher, and probably can. In other words, there's probably somebody somewhere that'll pay his demands. Somebody somewhere, But at what cost? Kicking the elderly and disabled out into the streets homeless. Making poor people move 1,000 miles away from their jobs, from their family, from their friends. No, folks. Landlords are committing crimes against humanity. It can't be allowed to continue anymore. I'm sorry, it just can't be allowed to continue. And with this COVID thing, I think people are finding out that anybody can become financially challenged. And when you become financially challenged, your life is at stake. Housing costs across America, take average wages and average salaries for most people, okay, and take average Social Security and disability. Okay, Social Security, disability, and Social Security are average somewhere between $1,200 and $1,400 a month, depending. Okay, some people make more than that. Yes, some people make less than that. I'm saying average. So when we have a growing population of senior citizens that are on fixed income somewhere in that neighborhood, and housing costs for a studio or a one-bedroom apartment are averaging, now again average, some are way higher, some are a little lower, but average right around $1,000 a month from coast to coast. That means that anybody that becomes elderly, everybody becomes elderly, but unless you died prematurely. So the elderly and disabled are being relegated at this point, due to current laws and due to current greed, to homelessness, a state of homelessness, or communal living, or begging for assistance. And HUD, government assistance for affordable housing, is at this point taxed. Affordable housing in certain regions have waiting lists. In my region, it was so bad that there was, in some places were telling me there was over a 10-year waiting list. And they weren't taking any more names because they had a 10-year waiting list. So there is definitely not enough affordable housing, period. And why is that? because due to greed in the private sector and due to the illegal actions of bankers and landlords, um, they have raised the cost of housing beyond the means of 50% of Americans to be able to afford it. Half of America right now, 50% of America right now is either on the verge of being homeless or under threat of being homeless or within a month, in other words, a month paycheck of being homeless. 50%, half of Americans now. So I'm not speaking about a minority here. I'm speaking about a growing majority. And if rich people don't want to see millions of pissed off, angry people, you've got to A, raise wages, and B, lower the cost of housing immediately. Immediately. I'm sorry, there has to be an immediate correction in America. Somebody, if I were president, I would just declare a state of national emergency. I would say, until further notice, man, anybody that owns multiple residences has to put them up for sale. And if that causes you to lose a substantial amount of money or whatever like that, document your losses. In other words, I wouldn't want any Americans to suffer financial loss, but anybody owning multiple residences at this point is driving up the cost of housing beyond 50% of the population to be able to afford any longer. So you're forcing more and more people out of the American dream and into renting and at the mercy of people that are becoming so greedy and so cruel that they're willing to kick the elderly and disabled out into the streets to suffer and die. People that evil, I don't know what you think should be done with them, but what I think is that that's what should happen to them. In other words, how would landlords feel if bankers on their mortgages, on all their properties, just said to them in 1 month, pay me whatever they can't pay, $1 billion next month, or turn over all your properties to us, and say hello to homelessness. In other words, anybody that's willing to do that to another citizen, that's what should happen to them. God says you reap what you sow. So bottom line is, if you have poor tenants on fixed income, and they tell you that they just cannot afford to pay more than whatever. Like I said, currently it's housing for the elderly and disabled has to be at $300 to $400 a month, or it's not affordable. It can't be more than that. It's not affordable. If somebody is like myself, attacked and injured and loses their entire estate, cannot return to work, loses all their years of earnings and everything, and has as a result of being left indigent, no legal suits filed in his behalf for lost wages, for pain and suffering, for dying prematurely, for all that. I lost my estate. I lost all my investments. My dog was shot, and it wasn't. I mean, these weren't unrelated events. It was just evil people, and so much pervasive corruption and greed in the world that it was like a Job-like thing. If I'd had children or whatever, I probably would have lost them just like he did. Bottom line is I'm not saying woe's me. I'm saying that what happened to me can happen to you. People think that it can't, but yes, it can. When you leave mass murdering doctors and nurses loose, and as far as I can tell, they've been getting away with murdering innocent citizens for decades. When you study iatrogenic deaths, you have to and you look at the numbers, it's in the millions worldwide every year. And in America alone, several hundred thousand reported iatrogenic deaths. In other words, hospital-caused deaths. In other words, people that die in a hospital, not from what they went in for, but from what doctors and nurses did to them. Several hundred thousand of those are reported every year. I'm not saying that all are reported. I'm just saying when you have several hundred thousand reported, in other words, ones that they couldn't cover up or get away with, you have to ask yourself, is the highly trained medical professionals so overworked and so tired that they're making lethal mistakes to the tune of, in America alone, several hundred thousand, and worldwide more than 1 million deaths every year in hospitals? Third leading cause of premature death. And I'm not even talking about the 20% of the population that is misdiagnosed or undiagnosed by doctors and nurses, medical malpractice, and so suffer and die out of hospitals. I'm just talking about in hospitals. Several hundred thousand people in America alone die each year prematurely at the hands of doctors and nurses. Okay, these are just facts. I'm just stating facts. And you have to ask yourself, do you really think those are all accidental? Doctors and nurses going to school for many years, okay? I'm not saying nurses per se, but doctors, higher education, highly intelligent people, all making so many mistakes, oopsies, that people are just dying left and right. Third leading cause of death. Due to their mistakes only? No. I'm telling you the truth. Greed is so bad that some doctors and nurses are getting away with murdering their patients. And in order to put an end to that, you have to arrest all of them, and you have to find out who put that in place in the first place, because it's not just in America, but it's all over this world. And so when you find the one connection that of anything in this world that's a global in scope connection, it always goes back to the wealthiest people on earth. The one connection is their money and their interests are funding these deadly things that are occurring against the innocent masses. If it wasn't put in place by higher authorities, then when I went to higher authorities, I would have gotten some assistance, because they would have recognized that leaving mass murdering doctors and nurses in hospitals is a threat to anybody. They could be traveling, rich people could be traveling and, I don't know, skiing or having a vacation or just going somewhere or whatever, and you could end up in a hospital. You could get in a car accident or whatever. And leaving mass murdering doctors and nurses in place. Now, when they find out you're rich, they typically will actually not attack you. But at the same time, they could attack you. Say your ID was lost and they didn't know if you were rich or not, and they needed some organs, and they knew they could make, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million in transplants right away. You might end up on a slate, man, cut, chopped up for your body parts. I hate to be like this. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, man. But we have a real problem in this country with too many people that have departed from the Almighty and proper virtues. Now, I'm not a perfect person, but man, I'm definitely not that evil. So, as far as I can tell, the wealthiest people on earth are. They have an agenda they think it's their prerogative or duty or mission or whatever to control the population on earth, to govern the population on earth, to oversee the population on earth, including who breeds and who doesn't breed. So they use the media sources to brainwash the poor masses into allowing you to slaughter your own babies, because they don't want you to have children. And you don't want to have children, not because you hate children, but because, unless you're, I don't know, one of the few that's also that evil, you know. But mostly poor people are the ones that feel like they just can't afford to have a child, because that's how terrible the world is under these greedy oppressors. They won't pay you a living wage. They won't pay you a proper wage. You can't afford to pay your bills. You suffer in life, and you suffer so much that you don't want to bring a precious child into the world. And that's all on purpose, folks. And who's to blame? It certainly isn't the poor people. Is the poor people offering you that slave wage? No. Poor people are just trying to survive like you are. So it's the rich. So the rich are making the laws in their favor, and they have rights and are able to defend them because they can hire professionals and so on and so forth. And more than that, if they're rich enough, they can just buy corrupt judges and corrupt lawyers and corrupt juries and anybody desperate enough for money to just do whatever they want. So integrity, honor, virtue is all at stake. And if it continues, all that will be left in the world is the most selfish, most greedy, most wicked, most evil people to fight and kill each other and eat whatever dead carcasses remain, because you're going to be so consumed with your greed that you're destroying life on the planet at an epic rate. So there won't be anything else to eat but one another if it continues to be this evil, or worse. So the bottom line is, we got to make we should declare a state of national emergency, make everybody that owns more than one home have to sell them, and in the process lower housing costs. In other words, if the government has to buy all those houses and then designate them, in other words, deed the titles or deeds over to poor citizens, that's what needs to happen. That's what should happen to correct the housing costs in America. And then just prohibit people from buying more than one home. Seriously, make it a law that everybody has the absolute right to one primary residence, that no other citizen can jack that cost on them, and that cost for housing is fixed at 30% of their income, even if they get injured, even if they get disabled, even if they get chronically or terminally ill. 30% of their income and no more. If they want to pay it off, and in other words, whatever the value actually is, and again, it shouldn't be, so high that it's ridiculous. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, modest home, should not be $500,000, folks. Now, some people living in the world where population is getting so high, homes are even higher than that. But on average, across America, just a standard small family house, we're not talking anything extravagant, is approaching $250,000 on average. And most Americans can no longer afford that because wages are not that high. And who's to blame? It certainly isn't the poor people. They don't even own a home. They don't even own one home. It's rich people that are living in palaces, that own more than one property, that are willing to kick even the elderly and disabled out in the streets to suffer and die. And I'm saying, folks, if they suffer some financial losses by passing a law that says they can no longer do that to other citizens, that's just not only illegal, but it's inhumane. It's crimes against humanity. In other words, no more landlords. Get rid of that concept. I've analyzed it. I've looked at it just about every way there is to look at it, and it's just an illegal concept. It is not equal treatment under the law. Landlord-tenant laws are in no way, shape, or respect constitutional. They are that it automatically creates a state of inequality in which any citizen can threaten another citizen's life and take their possessions from them. In other words, somebody that owns more than one property, owns homes, and so on and so forth, can take poor people's possessions just by jacking rents and kicking them out on the streets on short notice. This landlord, um, this poor disabled woman, I think she's in her 60s. He just kicked her out on the streets, and he just took all of her few possessions and put them in bags and just threw them on the street side. He didn't put them in the waste bin, but he gave her, I don't know how many days to come pick up her stuff, or he's going to throw it out. Now, but if she had, I don't know, some valuables or something like that, she was kicked out on short notice. I don't know what happened. He said she couldn't pay his rent demands. Well, it's just like that poor guy, man, that had his rent raised from $700 to $2,000 in 1 month. I don't know how that can even be legal. As far as I'm concerned, that's not legal. Like I said, it's so not legal. I am now an advocate for just making landlords completely illegal. Just make them illegal. If people want to invest, they can invest in corporations. They can build companies. They can hire people. They can employ people. In other words, if you want to get rich, you can get rich in other ethical ways. But as far as I can tell, being a landlord is not ethical. It just isn't. It would be one thing if people were so honorable that they wouldn't raise rent on poor people. But they're not. The evidence is in that people are not that honorable. The evidence is in that there are at least some people that, as long as there's no laws preventing it, will charge anything they can imagine in their head, and at whatever consequences happen to kicking somebody, some poor soul, out of their primary residence and right out into the streets. And I'm just saying, folks, I don't know about you, but I'm saying that's not legal. That's not ethical. It's not even humane. It is a crime against humanity. I'm saying that we have to get laws passed that in every single state, a poor person can call a firm of attorneys that will represent them and their legal interests just as if they were a rich person and could pay them whatever amount they demanded. That we just have to pass laws that make legal protection a right for all citizens, a right. We have it so that in court, if you're indigent and you're charged with a crime, an attorney will be appointed you. Public pretenders is what they're called most of the time. And the reason for that is, the reason why they're called public pretenders is they're paid by the state and or same funds, and they even work in the same building. When I was years ago, many years, decades ago now, in that situation myself, I witnessed firsthand public pretenders and district attorneys, prosecutors, sitting, their offices were side by side, and they would often sit in the same room and discuss cases together and barter people's lives. They'd be like, come on, man, I'll let you have that one. This guy's really not that bad, man. Come on. they would barter people's lives that way. It wasn't even about guilt or any. It was about their careers, advancements, about you know I don't know, about their feelings for for who they were defending, as to whether or not they felt, even if the person was guilty, as if they were somebody they should help out or not. And in other words, poor people absolutely do not get the same legal protection as rich people. Do you think prisons would be full with so many people if O.J. Simpson's team defended every single one of those poor souls in prison now? No, folks. Money. And it's gotten, corruption and greed has gotten so bad, so out of control, that we have to make laws to curtail people from killing other citizens in the streets just by their greed. Seriously. Seriously. This guy is on purpose kicking out the elderly and disabled, and it is illegal. It is discrimination. It absolutely is. But it's because he doesn't want anybody on a voucher program or anybody receiving government assistance in his building, because then he figures he can just jack the rates higher without interference from governing officials. So he's on purpose deliberately removing the elderly and disabled from this bill. In other words, he bought a building with the elderly and disabled in it, knowing and pre-planning that he was going to kick them out, and in order to charge higher rents. So it's an attack on the elderly and a deliberate attack on the elderly and disabled on his part, and it's very, very, very evil. It's extremely evil. It's extreme greed. And as far as I'm concerned, man, like I said, persons like that should find themselves homeless, should find themselves on the streets, penniless. Everything they own should be taken from them, and they should find out what it's like, what they've done to other citizens. They should experience what they've done to innocent citizens by their greed. They really should. I think that's the only way that it'll ever penetrate their brains, that what they're doing is extremely evil. Extremely evil. And it's just the pursuit of greed. It's just, how can I make money any way and every way that other people will allow me to do? And currently, it's apparently legal for rich people to buy all the real estate and make people homeless and displace them sometimes thousands of miles in the process by buying everything up so that there's just no place for them to go. So folks, if you think that's right, if you think that's right, imagine being disabled and trying to survive homeless. If you think that's right, just even in your current state of health, try homelessness for a while. Find out what it's like. I've already been there. I already know. It's an attack on people's lives. In the current state of affairs, with as much crime and corruption and as much desperation as there is, making somebody homeless is an absolute attack on their life, let alone making the elderly and disabled homeless. So when somebody with premeditation does what this landlord's doing, I'm saying they're committing crimes. I'm saying it's not just a civil matter. I'm saying it's a criminal matter. I'm saying that people everywhere should demand that this practice cease by law. In other words, just make landlords a thing of the past by making it illegal. No landlords. Everybody has a right, an absolute right, to their own primary residence. I'm not saying that it's given to them for free. I'm saying that they have to if they're healthy and can work, that they have to pay 30%, no more than 30% of their earnings, of their net earnings, and that's not after their other expenses. That's just after what they take home after Social Security and taxes. Their take-home check, 30% of that for housing, and no more than 30%. So if somebody's only making $1,200 a month, they only for housing they only pay 30% of that, $360 or whatever. And no more than that. Now, if they want to pay more in order to pay off their ownership interest sooner in a property, they can. But I'm just saying, they can't be kicked out of their primary residence. If they get injured, if they get chronically ill, terminally ill, and can't work anymore, all the months that they're waiting to be put on disability and so on and so forth, they can't be evicted, they can't be foreclosed on, nothing. Citizens cannot kick a living person out in the streets, homeless, to suffer and die. I'm sorry, man, no. Just make landlords illegal so that it's not property rights versus the right to life. It's not even an issue anymore, because just being a landlord is an illegal concept, because it allows a citizen the supposed legal right to demand money from another citizen under extreme threat of duress. When you demand money from another citizen by threat, that is an absolute crime. So landlords are getting away with committing a criminal act only because somehow, for some reason, the poor masses have been putting up with it for far too long. Stop it. That is absolutely a criminal act. They are, in fact, threatening your life. They're threatening your life if you don't pay them rent. They're threatening your life by homelessness and exposure to the elements, especially if you're elderly and disabled. And they're threatening your life by threatening to call the police, right? Threatening to call the police on you. Okay, the police are armed, and they have a growing reputation of abuse of authority, and that's just because of the sheer numbers, and that's just because of stress, and also growing pervasive corruption, and that's due to a growing number of people that have been brainwashed in our public education by evolutionary dogmas that tell them there's no God. Straight up, it is absolutely attributable to brainwashing in our public schools with that evolutionary crap. It is absolutely not scientific, and anybody who thinks it is brainwashed. Straight up. I don't care how many years of education you have. I don't care if the world considers you a leading expert. If you believe in the evolutionary dogmas of the atheistic, evolutionary, naturalistic worldview, if you're currently in that worldview, you're brainwashed, and you're definitely not using the mind God gave you in a most profitable manner, because that is absolute BS. And if you don't think so, read my 5-part series, which I posted on Facebook, called The Evolutionary Paradigm is Not Scientific. In fact, it doesn't even rise to the merit of good science fiction. And the only reason why anybody anywhere believes in it is because they're desperate, absolutely desperate, to do away with the fact that we live in a supernatural creation by the one true and only God, who has declared himself as the Lord Jesus Christ plainly, and can be known by anyone, and should be known by everyone. Straight up. Straight up. I'm saying, if you believe that there is no God, and you believe that everything exists causelessly, in other words, nothing created everything, that everything, the universe just exists. Now, if you believe the universe exists or has existed forever, then you're dismissing so many scientific laws in that thought that you could be qualified as at least ignorant, if not delusional. Okay? In other words, we know by the laws of epistemology, the laws of logic and reason, the laws of causation and so on and so forth, cause and effect, etc., etc. We know by what is a scientific law that has remained a scientific law under scrutiny for the longest period of time, that there has to be, for the effect of the universe, a cause in sufficient power and scope to have brought it into existence. And we are told that that cause, plainly, in the divinely inspired contents of the Holy Bible, is God. And it's not like that's some kind of concocted fiction, folks. The, the God who created everything came into this world, showed himself, declared himself, and proved himself divine by controlling creation at his word in front of eyewitnesses. And that's all recorded in the most reliable reference book on earth, the divinely inspired Holy Bible. So he showed he had power over his creation, so much so that he said, look, I'm going to lay down my life just so I can raise it up again to prove to you that when I say I'm the resurrection and the life and that I have eternal life, I mean it. And that's what Jesus Christ did, folks. He laid down his life on the cross, publicly crucified in front of eyewitnesses. Nobody, no historian in the first century denies the fact that that happened. Only people that came along centuries later are denying that that ever happened. None of the eyewitnesses that saw it happen denied it happened. So it happened, folks. Okay? And Jesus Christ, the Lord Jesus Christ, the God of creation, came into this world, said he was the God of creation, said he was the resurrection and the life, said he was life itself, says he's truth itself. See, he was saying, look, I'm the one who's been talking to you since the beginning. He was saying in no uncertain terms, he's the eternal creator. And he furthermore says that anybody that obeys his divine instructions, his divine commandments to repent and get baptized in his name, will receive his spirit, whereby they will know him. Know him. Okay, I know the Lord Jesus Christ. I have seen the Lord Jesus Christ face to face. Okay, I know the one true God. I know. This person here, this person, Michael Swinson, knows the one true God, the eternal creator. Now, why he's allowed so much evil in this world is something I have mused over again and again and again. And I have, there are answers. They might seem glib, they might seem cliche, but he gives us answers. He said, look, I planted only wheat. Now, who's planted these tares? And by tares, he's referring to all these wicked people, people that are determinedly evil. And he's saying an enemy's done this, the devil has done this. He's basically saying that in this world, there are sons and daughters of God, and they at least, from their inside, from inside their soul, they actually really want to be good and decent, honorable, virtuous people. Those are the sons and daughters of God. But there are people that inside don't want to be good. They actually want to be evil. Those are the sons and daughters of the devil. If you currently want to be evil and don't want to end up in the lake of fire, if you have any sanity or any sense of self-preservation, you should ask the Lord Jesus Christ, the one who created and made you, to cause you to want to be good, to cause you to repent inside and to choose to be good, to choose to be good and righteous like him. You should ask him to change you and make you into a good and righteous person like him, if you don't want to end up in the lake of fire. Because that's where all the devils, in other words, all evil, unrepentant people, mass murderers, rapists, liars, con artists, people that deny the divine, the insane, except that you're all headed towards sure destruction. Now, I know you don't want to hear that, but that's what he tells us, and God says what he means, and he means what he says. And it doesn't make him evil to confine evil. In other words, to take all evildoers and put them in one place so they can't harm anyone else ever again. And that's what he tells us he's going to do. So he says, in the meantime, he says, if I were to try to weed out the tares, if I were to try to destroy all evil in this world, it would inadvertently get some of the wheat as well. In other words, isn't that what natural disasters do? If God sends, I don't know, an earthquake, I don't know, a volcano explodes, meteors from above, whatever, massive diseases and so on and so forth, aren't the righteous and the wicked at risk? I mean, don't they both lose their home? Not always. There's cases where, sometimes, Christians have been praying in a closet and a tornado or a hurricane came through, and the only structure for miles was that closet still standing. So what I'm getting at is there's been fires where all the homes in an entire region were all burned except for one home where a Christian was praying around their yard, their entire yard, saying, "This fire shall not come upon my land in Yehoshua's mighty name," or in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Yehoshua HaMashiach. And so with faith, they fought a disaster and calamity from happening, and God honored them for it. But it doesn't happen all the time, and that's why Christ said, you can't pull out or get rid of all evil in this world, because even those that long to be righteous at this point still aren't. We're still not perfected yet. So if you get rid of all evil, you're getting rid of everyone. In other words, none of us are perfect. None of us are good and perfect like he is until he perfects us. And it absolutely is his work to do so. He's the perfect one. In other words, we're all imperfect. We can't perfect ourselves. How can something imperfect with its own flaws? Lots of times we don't even recognize our own flaws. It takes somebody else to point out our flaws before we even recognize them. So the point being is we are the clay and he's the potter. We are the workmanship of his hands. So until he perfects us, he's saying that there's evil in this world because everybody at some point in time has thought something that's not right, said something that's not right, and done something that's not right. And he says until he determines the wheat and the tares are going to grow together and mature. But once matured, in other words, as time goes on, wickedness becomes more wicked and righteousness becomes more righteous. And I'm calling to the righteous, I'm calling upon the Lord Jesus Christ ultimately to intervene not only in my behalf, but in your behalf, in behalf of the people, the poor oppressed masses on earth this day, to say to the rich and greedy that you either start paying us proper wages and reduce housing, in other words, make a primary home a right for all citizens. You either do that right now, or we're going to remove you from power. We're going to remove you out of your palaces, and we're going to kick you out in the streets and see if you like it. And we're going to take all your assets and distribute it to all the people you have enslaved and oppressed this day. That's what you should do. That is absolutely what you should do. And if landlords don't go along with, in other words, if there's anybody that tries to fight making landlords illegal, anybody tries to fight it, kick them out in the streets homeless, seize all their assets, take all their possessions, and leave them there to beg. Because that's what landlords are doing to poor people this day. And then they'll understand that it has to be illegal. You just can't, don't even try to regulate rents or anything like that. Just make being a landlord illegal. There's so many people on earth in need of housing and affordable housing that you just have to say people don't need more than one home. If you want to travel, there are hotels and motels enough everywhere on earth for you to travel to. But you don't need more than one home. One primary residence for every person, okay? Um, if you're a married person and in a family and become divorced, then once you're separate again, you both still have a right to a primary residence. So the bottom line is since there are homeless people world over, until there are no homeless people, landlords must be illegal. And as far as I'm concerned, just make it perpetual. Just make it perpetual, because otherwise, you're saying that certain citizens with money can go up to poor people or other citizens and demand money for them under threat and duress. You're basically trying to legalize a criminal act, and essentially a criminal act. It's not legal. It's not right. It's not ethical. It's not moral. It's not constitutional. It's not humane. So, no more landlords. I hope I'm clear about this. No more landlords. And bankers, if somebody becomes sick, injured, etc., they cannot foreclose on that person's property. It's the same thing about landlords. You're still putting an innocent person under duress for money, for property. It's their life at stake, and all that you're out is maybe pieces of paper. Now those might be precious to you, but you're not going to die. But kicking somebody out of their home can definitely kill them, especially if they're injured or disabled, chronically ill. So what bankers are getting away with by being rich and by making laws in their favor, and landlords and realtors and all kinds of rich people are getting away with, is maltreating poor people. And I've suffered lifelong, and I've had it. I've had it. I hope that my life will serve to bring back some sanity to humanity. Make landlords illegal, and make it illegal for banks to foreclose on people that are elderly on fixed income, disabled, um, injured through no fault of their own, chronically ill, and make them just have to reduce the mortgage. Yeah, they won't get their money as fast, but they just can't kick those people out of their homes. No. It's not right of other citizens to participate in more hardship upon people that have already suffered criminal acts that have injured them severely, like what happened to me. It's not right. Now, I really contemplated standing my ground on my home, because it was my life savings, and I knew that going into Tennessee was an extreme hardship for people, and I'm not healthy. I didn't want to do it. So I thought about, standing my ground on my property against the bankers, forcefully. But I knew all that would happen is they would call the police, and the rich people, the ones that were actually making it all happen, bringing hardship upon my life and taking my home away from me, and so on and so forth, were going to sit back while poor people, again, most police are not rich, fought to the death. So I knew I was going to be risking innocent lives, including my own, while doing nothing to address the real problem, which is bankers, the wealthiest people on earth, maltreating poor people and getting away with it because they got the politicians in their pockets, because wealthy people are able to pay them. So people just kind of do what people that give them money tell them to, pretty much. And it's not legal, it's not ethical, it's not right, but yeah, it's exactly how it is. I'm saying that the only way to change it is to tell those in power that they will be removed one way or another if they don't listen to us. No more landlords, And no more bankers kicking poor people out of their homes, kicking the elderly and disabled and chronically ill, people injured in wars, people injured by crime, out into the streets homeless. No more of that crap. It needs to end right now. Or I don't know how anybody doing that thinks that they're going to find a home in heaven if they're treating any one of God's children that way. And I'm definitely one of his sons. I'm not the son of God. I am a son of God. And everybody that receives him is a son or daughter of God. In other words, the scriptures tell us that Jesus Christ is the spermata. In other words, the genetic makeup of God Almighty. And that we must be born again. That we must be born not just of the flesh, but we must be born of his spirit. So if we want to be born of the spirit of our eternal Creator to become one of his sons or daughters, we have to receive Jesus Christ as our personal Lord and Savior. We are told that he is the exact representation of the invisible eternal Creator. We are told that he is in fact the seed or spermati of God, the genetic makeup of God. We are told that one of his titles, in other words, of the visible image of the eternal Creator, Jesus Christ, one of his titles is the only begotten Son of God. In other words, directly begotten straight from the invisible eternal Creator, is the visible image of the man, the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, the Alpha and Omega, Jesus Christ. We're told that he made all things, including this world, and that this world didn't receive him, maltreated him. And so he told us that if you receive him, don't think it strange that the world will also hate and despise you. Well, boy, I have experienced that part of the scriptures. I would like to experience the blessings, if you don't mind. If people praying for me. In other words, he told us we would have blessings with persecutions and with maltreatment and with hatred and so on and so forth. Um, I suppose I feel like I haven't had enough of the blessings. I've had a lot of maltreatment, and I'm not saying God is negligent. I'm not laying any fault on him at all. I'm just saying I would prefer blessings over persecution and more hatred and more maltreatment. I'd prefer some happy, good moments, some times where good people are able to get together and create good memories. I actually enjoy singing praises just as much as any Christian does. Getting together, singing, praises and worship to God. Nobody hurting each other. Everybody just being friends. I enjoy those moments just as much as I think any sane son or daughter of God does. I haven't had enough of this. What I'm saying is I haven't had enough of those good, wonderful moments where everybody's just getting along and being friends. At any rate, so I started this by saying make landlords illegal, and I want to end it. Make landlords illegal. Everybody that has multiple properties um, by government power, eminent domain, um, national crisis, however you want to say it. We got to end homelessness, and we have to end people that are in fear for their lives of being homeless. And there's millions in that boat now. So I'm saying just make landlords illegal. It's just, like I said, just think of the concept. It's not right. It's not right for any citizen to be able to walk up to another citizen under dire threat and duress and demand whatever money they may have or don't have from them, lowering their quality of life on their whim of their greed. Because that's what's been going on for too long now. My whole life it's been going on. I've had it. Landlords have been constantly pushing me around. I have lost all kinds of possessions in the process, all kinds of, and it's not like I've been rich. I've been poor. Otherwise, I wouldn't be renting. I'd be owning. If everybody has their own right to their own dwelling, there won't be any tenants anyways. So just make landlords illegal. Just make that entire concept go away, because it's no matter how you slice it or dice it, it's unethical. It in its very nature and practice, it's absolutely criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And I don't care that it's been allowed to go on for a while just because rich people have been in power. It's wrong. It needs to go away. It needs to go away like today. If I were president, I would declare a state of national emergency and make it go away. Homeless people would be taken off the streets, and everybody on threat of foreclosure could breathe a sigh of relief when and if you actually get a living wage again. Then, in other words, you go back to work and get proper wages if your health returns or whatever. Then and only then would you have to resume payments, and it would be no more than 30% of your net earnings each month. So let's make that happen. Please, people, unite and make that happen. No more landlords, and no more bankers foreclosing on injured, innocent citizens, elderly, disabled people, victims of crime, injured veterans. No more of that crap. Instead, the rich people that are living in palaces can absolutely, positively can afford to absorb some patience. I'm not even talking about financial losses. They're going to get paid. It's just going to take them longer to get paid than by kicking people out of their homes and their streets to die. So no more of that crap going down. Please. Please, everyone advocate for that to happen. I'd like to see it happen before I leave this world myself. In other words, during my journey of incarnation, I'd like to see it become illegal, if I had my way, worldwide. No more landlords. What you can do to preserve properties of people that are working all the time and too poor or too disabled to maintain the properties is simply, as part of affordable housing, as part of HUD, hire the same types of groundskeepers rich people do. There's tons of landscapers, landscape architects, and people needing work. So just make that part of affordable housing units, that they're maintained by people that are able-bodied, by people that are healthy, by people that are wealthy. Straight up. And if people say, well, why should wealthy people have to take care of poor people and stuff? You're not looking at it right. You should be asking yourselves, why should poor people let wealthy people kill them in the streets without going after those wealthy people? That's how you need to look at it. Straight up. Straight up. In other words, if you want to live in your palaces safe and secure, it behooves you to be decent towards the poor people you're snubbing your noses at. In other words, no amount of walls can keep a mob of millions of angry citizens from coming for you if you continue to maltreat them. So you need to stop it. You need to make laws that respect their right to life. And in a civilized world, that is a right to shelter, housing. And I'm not talking about house them like you do dogs and maltreatment in tiny cubicles. I'm talking about a decent, you know, I don't know what minimum square footage should be, but you got to ask a rich person, you know, living in a mansion of a million square feet or more. You know what I'm saying? You know, I mean, even if they're in a mansion of 50,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet, you got to ask a rich person what do they think the minimum square footage for one person should be. In other words, ask the people that are living in on square miles of land and in mansions and in skyscrapers, of millions of square feet and so on and so forth worth of improvements. Ask the wealthy what they think the minimum square footage is, and if they come back and say that poor people should be relegated to something like 50 square foot, then make them live on a toilet for a few months, and say, care to revise that? 50 square 5 by 10. In other words, stop letting wealthy people. It's one thing for them to snub their noses at you. It's another thing for them to actually abuse you and maltreat you openly, like they're doing by being landlords and bankers that kick you out of your home if you get injured or disabled, and landlords that kick you out of your home just if they just feel like it. Now, you supposedly have some legal rights and protection, but like I said, if you're a poor person, do you see lawyers coming running to your aid? I never have. It would be nice. That's why I'm saying that's another thing that has to be put into law, that all citizens are entitled to legal protection, not just when they go to court for trials of crime, but for civil matters, for protecting their rights under fair housing and so on and so forth. At least that much. That's a step. That's a little tiny baby step in the right direction. The Fair Housing Act and anti-discriminatory laws. But again, poor people don't have money to hire attorneys to protect their rights in that regard. So they have to notify the government, and the government gets such notices. But there's how do you say, there's so many in need and not enough people to meet the need in their defense. And that's why you just have to make it law that just the very concept of landlord is a crime. It's a crime. It automatically elevating one citizen above another, and just in that concept, and that destroys the Constitution, equal protection clause right away. So it's just not constitutional, and there needs to it just needs to be done away with. No more landlords. Everybody owns one primary residence, no more. Too many people on earth. Um, if the wealthy are arguing that there's too many people and not enough land, then there certainly isn't room for them to own all the real estate, and for the masses to own nothing. That's not right. And we, the masses, have to say so, because the rich obviously aren't going to change on their own. They never have. All right, I've said it enough. Make landlords illegal now. Thank you. when citizens, all citizens are not treated equally. Um, I'm not saying that we should all live in luxury and palaces or anything like that, like the ultra wealthy of the world. I'm just saying that generally the ultra wealthy of the world have established our civilization as it is, with the exceptions of the times when the peasants revolt and or enough citizens unite in order to basically make the wealthy treat them with at least a little bit of respect. In other words, almost everything that we have in America that we think of as our humanitarian and constitutional rights were fought for. And who primarily were the people fighting? It's always been the wealthiest people on earth oppressing the poor masses. And you're letting them still get away with it. By that I mean the wealthiest people on earth are the ones primarily that sponsor, if you want to call it that, politicians and stuff. In other words, it's certainly not poor people that are running the world. Is my point. It's the wealthiest people on earth, and they've made laws that everybody else is putting up with, and I wish you wouldn't. In other words, it's like this. Young person, you're coerced into public indoctrination, which is again been taken over by Antichrist primarily. So your education is actually in brainwashing, to which you think that it's scientific to believe in the nonsense they've pushed on you for several generations here in America, ever since Rockefeller took over the Board of Education, which is the theory of evolution, which is pure nonsense. And again, I know I sound like a broken record on that, but it is. It's absolute, total rubbish, and completely unscientific, despite how many of them jump up and down and insist otherwise. There's no scientific basis for the theory of evolution. There just isn't. It's a cultic belief espoused by, again, Antichrist. In other words, God-hating, anti-biblicist people that took over public education and have been brainwashing children with that crap. Science supports biblical creation. In other words, the Holy Bible is supported by actual historic fact and scientific facts from Genesis through Revelation. It is not, in other words, the Holy Bible is not incompatible with science at all. It's only incompatible with the cultic beliefs of evolutionists, because their cultic beliefs are just that. They're just completely unsubstantiated. Really, they are. It's just that you've been fed that crap so much that you actually think science supports it, and it doesn't. In other words, objective reality and scientific facts do not support the theory of evolution in any way, and in any of the evolutionary paradigm, pure hogwash. Anytime you take God out of the picture, you've immediately entered into a realm of fantasy. We live in a supernatural reality, and God hasn't been hiding himself or anything like that. He's been declaring himself from generation to generation to generation. And in English, he's known as the Lord Jesus Christ. If you want to know the one true God, you need to call upon him. The one true God will make himself known to you if you get serious with him. Now, for me, it was a matter of life and death. In other words, I wanted an answer from the Almighty if he existed. I didn't know for sure. In other words, I'd been brainwashed with that crap too, so I just didn't know. But I had encountered in my brief lifespan a few people that claimed that they knew that God actually existed and was very real, and that they knew him personally, and that they also knew that anybody else could know him personally, and that included me. And just hearing that one time at least gave me the thought, is that really true? Is that actually possible? That we can know our eternal creator and learn from our eternal creator directly and personally? I wanted to know. I wanted to know so intensely that for me it was a matter of life and death. In other words, my taste of this world and the civilization they've created left such a distaste in my being that I didn't even want to be here. I figured that, the only place I'd ever been comfortable is away from civilization, high up in the mountains and virgin, pristine forests that no man had ever tread upon. Those were my happiest places. The only thing that, left me not satisfied with living there was the fact that I at least wanted one essential other. In other words, I wanted a wife. And so the quest for finding a loving wife brought me back down into civilization from high up in the mountains. But otherwise, I would have stayed there. In other words, I hate. I don't know. I don't hate everything about our civilization. There's all kinds of things I like about it, but in general, I hate the caste system, which is the primary foundation of our society and so-called global civilization. It's a concentration of wealth where very few people live incredibly luxurious, wonderful lives, and then a tiny percentage under them, live equal compared to the vast majority of the masses live equally wonderful lives, and more than half of humanity is suffering from oppression and poverty. And at the very bottom, it's so extreme that it's pure hell. A life of either begging or crime, a life where if you have any ambitions or dreams outside of just trying to stay alive for the day, they get crushed over and over and over again. Even in America, a poor person, man, relegated to slave wages, is kicked around their entire lives by landlords because they can't afford to own. Their credit gets attacked from day one. Think about this, right? Think about this. The poor can't afford whatever college or higher education or even trade school, anything like that. So you're in servile industry jobs, or blue collar if you can work yourself into a trade, and renting. Through the process of renting, landlords are constantly jacking the cost of housing, sometimes by 50% in 1 month in some places. And I'm speaking personally right here. Close to 30-40% hikes in 1 month of your housing costs on the working poor, elderly, and disabled. That is an attack on their lives. And landlords get away with it. Why? Because the laws are made by the wealthy and favor the wealthy and completely crush the poor. For any citizen to walk up to another citizen and under dire threat demand money from them, whether it's for housing or for any reason, the threat of homelessness, the loss of your personal possessions, the threat of losing your job potentially, of being forced to relocate sometimes hundreds or thousands of miles away because all the landlords have raised rent in the entire region to the point where you can't find anything. So you're either stuck being homeless or having to relocate. And if you don't have the means to relocate, in other words, if you don't have your own vehicle or enough money to get one or anything like that, you can. The poorest of the poor, even in America, not just other places on earth, but even in America, can literally be forcibly by the police, which are armed mercenaries of the wealthy, be dragged out of your residence and tossed out into the streets, literally, and you're left no recourse, and all because some landlord just decided to raise rents beyond your means, or you suffered an injury, or you were a victim of crime, or you got chronically ill, or you just simply grew old and could no longer afford, no longer had the energy to obtain and maintain a job, and so you were relegated to below poverty level subsistence on Social Security. And the wealthy sit there and blame the more than 90% of Americans that are not financially sound by the time they hit retirement. In other words, more than 90% of Americans need financial assistance of some kind from Social Security by the time they retire. So only 10% have achieved some type of financial independence by the time they retire. Those are not very good odds, folks. What I'm getting at is the wealthy um, pay you slave wages your whole life, and then when you can't meet their rent demands, damage your credit so you can't get loans, or you can't even rent from another landlord, even no matter how desperate you are, or you have to or you have to pay more because your credit has been damaged by wealthy people who A, don't pay you enough to pay your bills, and B, charge you housing costs that you can't afford. What a racket, right? They get to slam you, they get to step on you, they get to drive you into the streets and call you dirtbags and scumbags, poor, um, untrustworthy people with low credit ratings. Because why? Because they themselves created and made the system that allows them to slander and libel 90% of Americans and get away with it. 90% of Americans are putting up with it. The wealthy are enslaving you, they're oppressing you, they are maltreating you, they are abusing you lifelong, and then blame you when you can't meet their rent demands, when you can't qualify for a mortgage. They blame you for poor fiscal management when they don't give you enough to manage. Landlords are getting away with extortion, folks. Um, the free market doesn't work with regards to housing costs, and this is why. Um, the free market works with luxuries, right? In other words, if people have enough money to go buy themselves a whatever, a diamond necklace or something like that, and they choose to do so, well, they can get, well, even that's a racket. Diamond prices are highly regulated and fixed. Same thing with pearls and gemstones in general. It's not free market. You might think it is, but it's actually a racket by the wealthiest people on earth that have invested in interest and actually own all those raw stones, or they bought quarries and and suppliers and and own entire distribution centers. And so they only release so much. In other words, they might stockpile a whole mountain of diamonds, but they only release so much into circulation. And when they release it, it's a highly regulated set prices. It's total racketeering. So there's a whole bunch of things that are in the free market that are just not free market at all, folks. And 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 when they meddle with commodities like the price of whatever wheat or things like that, and again they do this all the time too, insider trading. Now they went after Martha Stewart. Who knows? Maybe Martha was going to blow the whistle or something, or they just needed somebody to pick on. But Martha's just like tip the iceberg when it comes to insider trading by the wealthiest people on earth that are actually fixing and setting the prices, paying farmers to grow or not to grow. All this stuff goes on regular, folks. And meanwhile, nations of the poor and oppressed starve to death. Why these people just play with their wealth. And if they want the price of something to go up, they just tell the farmers, don't grow that. And this is our civil. What I'm getting at is when I looked at how our civilization is run, in order to get ahead or real wealth, the only way I could actually see doing it was either to accumulate from people that are struggling every bit as hard as I have been my entire life, um, to invent something, innovate something. Um, if you can actually succeed at getting it patented and protect it, from getting stolen from all the conglomerates that, all those places that advertise on television, submit your ideas here. Yeah, if you're a poor person and don't have protection and you submit an idea to one of those places, some rich, shark man comes in and swoops that up right quick, like patents it, and you, who were the real inventor and innovator, are kicked to the curb. In other words, the system is not built on trust, on honor, on virtue, on respect. It's built by criminals of the greediest, most selfish kind on earth. And the only time it ever gets rectified, in other words, the only time it ever gets mitigated at all for the better, is when enough of you get fed up with their crap that you unite and stand up against them. Labor rights, man. All right, people fought to the death to get just fair wages. But every chance they get, man, they'll put you on a salary and work you every waking moment just to get away with paying you less than minimum wage. Oh man, I've been through the system. I have worked enough jobs, enough slave wage jobs across America, man, to know how it works. And 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 the bottom line is, they'll say to you over and over again, you're expendable. There's another hungry mouth to feed. There's somebody who'll take your place. You can't negotiate your wages, not unless you're some kind of super genius, like I said, that has innovated and invented something totally unique and somehow succeeded in getting enough friends or enough contacts that you have some level of protection. In other words, you found a rare person that has money, that's honorable, that knows how to get your invention or innovation patented and protected, at least nationally, if not internationally, before some shark snaps it up and calls it their own. And people do that with your ideas and everything throughout your entire life. Folks, it's not a pretty picture. Greed has taken over far too many consciousness out there, and it's causing the world to descend into worse and worse levels of evil, to the point where, more than half of Americans are renting right now, and 90% are not financially independent by the time they reach retirement age, and yet everybody grows old. So you need to fight while you still have your health and strength to do so, for retirement communities for everybody, not just the rich. When they put you through the grindstone, and you're at the end of your days and you can barely stand on your feet, and you're looking at being homeless, dying in the streets because you can't pay the rent demands from landlords that are just getting as much as they possibly can of what pennies you may have saved or earned along the way. So it's a racket by the bankers, and bankers are the wealthiest people on earth. So they set up these credit reporting agencies, and they're the ones dinging you for bad credit. When bottom line is bad credit is a result of what? Not a result of financial mismanagement. It's a result of not having any finances to manage, typically. In other words, what hurts your credit the worst, right, are evictions and foreclosures, things like that, right, where you borrowed from the bankers and then couldn't pay, because those bankers are the same ones that manage the multinationals. They're the wealthiest people on earth, folks. They're the people that have the money. They're the multi-billionaires on earth, and people even richer than them. In other words, people that have unlimited wealth, living in palaces like the Rothschilds and stuff like that. The people that run the World Bank, that issue credits to whole nations, and whole nations, pay them interest on credits that they just generate from electronically on a computer. There's it's not even fiat currency, folks. It's all just it's all just digital credits these days, and it's more and more trending that way. In other words, less and less cash, right? And this, as far as I can tell, this COVID thing is a way to get even less cash in circulation, less coins, less paper. As far as I can tell, this is some kind of actually planned device to further go cashless and to further enslave the masses. In other words, to be able to digitally turn on or off your access to your whatever pathetic credits they give you for your slave wages. Now, only half of Americans at this point, it used to be closer to 70-80% were homeowners. Now, just in recent history, it's gone down to about half. In other words, the rental community is increasing exponentially due to wealth concentration and due to people that are inflating the housing market by the buy it and flip it practices. In other words, realtors, real estate investors, people that are making money by basically extorting the working poor, the elderly, and disabled. If you don't think landlords are extorting money from the working poor, elderly, and disabled, ask the 50% of renting Americans. Ask them if they think their rents are in any way, shape, or form reasonable compared to their wages. Bankers want to see your housing costs be no more than 30% of your total income. But Social Security and Social Security disability averages around $1,200. Some people have less, some people have a little more, but $1,200 a month. But that's also the average rent for a one bedroom. In other words, the entire earnings that the elderly and disabled are relegated to try to survive on, housing cost is taking all of it, or virtually all of it. That, in other words, it should be $300 or $400 a month housing cost, based on their monthly income. Housing costs are 3 to 4 times too high across the country, and it's not due to a lack of housing. It's due to only a few people owning it, and the rest of us are renting. And if you're renting in any area that the wealthy invest in other words, wealthy people just start buying up all the real estate there, then you're immediately looking at having to move or be homeless, and having to move to some place the wealthy people, don't want to invest in. In other words, crime areas, slums, slovenly areas, poor, oppressed places on earth. In other words, they are attacking your life, your quality of life, and the rich and landlords, real estate investors are crushing the working poor, the elderly, and disabled under their feet, just so they can accumulate more luxuries for themselves. So what I was getting at is the free market, capitalism works for luxuries, but it doesn't work for food. It doesn't work for clothing. In other words, the basic necessities of life, and it definitely doesn't work for housing. Not without killing people in the process. In other words, the only time housing comes down is when enough people die, that there's so many vacancies that even the investors have to, lower their greedy demands. But only after people are crushed to death. So it's a racket, and landlords are factually criminals. They're factually extorting money from people. Yes, they are. They're extorting money by threatening them with homelessness, the loss of your personal possessions, in order to charge whatever rents they think they can get from another desperate soul that doesn't want to die homeless. The working poor are displaced, bullied, kicked around until they're living in slums or homeless. So, either housing costs have to be regulated nationwide to prevent this. In other words, just to make landlords go away. Nobody can be a landlord anymore because landlords are factually criminals. It would be one thing if landlords had a conscience, you know, all of them had a conscience for their tenants and realized that they're poor tenants, man, lives are on the line. That moving is one of the most stressful things. Next, it's so stressful psychologically that it's rated up there as one of the most stressful things in life, just under death of a close relative, a sibling, a spouse, child, parent. That's how stressful moving is. I mean, coerced moving. In other words, even planned moving is stressful, but coerced moving, unplanned moving, in other words, a disaster destroys your home and you have to move. Or landlords just come in and buy your building and jack rents so high that you have to move on short notice. People are like, and not all people, but many people are like trees. The longer they are planted in an area, the more they take root there, and the more they grow there, flourish there. But every time they're uprooted, people can be transplanted, yes, but it is stressful. Some people die in the process, just like when you try to transplant plants. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. Every time a person is forced to move, especially if they're elderly and disabled, and especially if they've been soaked by landlords so much that they have no savings, no money for deposits, no money for. Not everybody can move into these retirement communities that have um, progressions where you start out as an independent senior, and as you age, and it starts to get harder and harder for you to do even basic things like feed and clothe yourself, bathe yourself, um, just get groceries. Um, if you're not, how do you say, dying in war, if you're just dying of old age and you're a senior person that doesn't have children or loved ones to help you out, you get to a point where you can't even make it to the toilet on your own strength if you're just dying of old age. Now, there might be a few exceptions, but generally, if you're dying of old age, you reach a point where you can't feed yourself anymore, you can't bathe anymore, you can't clothe yourself anymore, you can't even like roll over in bed. Your strength goes. It it's horrible. Dying is not pleasant. Now it's wonderful if you lived a life and you can at least lie there with memories, and especially if you made your peace with God and you're looking forward to leaving this world of sorrow, suffering, and death and going to a place where there's none of that, paradise. Well, then you can at least get excited in your thoughts. But otherwise, man, dying in this world is a miserable, especially if it's a slow, painful one, miserable process. It is not pleasant, folks. A lot of people try not to even look at it. You know, it's hard. Um, those that are going through it try to minimize. They try to minimize their amount of suffering that they. In other words, they don't tell their loved ones everything they're going through because they're not wanting to. I don't know. Make their loved ones, grieve for them more than they already probably are. So lots of times the elderly and the dying will try to put on a happy face, you know. But folks, it is not pleasant. It's so unpleasant that for somebody like myself that's experienced it and taken a really good look at it, I am a strong, absolute strong proponent for patients' rights, patients' choice, end of life compassionate care. That's what I call it. In other words, if a person has gotten to a point where they just don't have the strength to even talk hardly. They're fighting for just breathing. To not give them the option of peacefully going to sleep, from my perspective, is cruel. Downright cruel. Now, some people might say that I'm trying to find fault with God, and I'm not trying to find fault with God at all. I'm trying to point out that our civilization is highly biased. It's ruled by the wealthy. The poor don't have any end of life compassionate care communities. They can't afford those retirement communities. There's no shuffleboard for them or community, rec center or something for them. The poor are dying in the streets, or before they're tossed out of their home for their inability to pay, they just stop eating and drinking right there in their life early. Now, I'm not trying to bum people out, folks. I'm trying to say that changes for our civilization have only improved under wealthy oppression when the poor peasants unite. And you got to unite while you still have the strength to stand up for your lives and that of your loved ones, to stand up for your future. You might have hopes and dreams, but reality is 90% of Americans, and these are Americans, don't reach that American dream. They don't get to die in a happy, home with loved ones around them and so on and so forth instead. So we need to build a civilization where everybody treats everybody like family. Where we don't have people wounded in wars, whether it's psychologically, emotionally, mentally, whatever, whether it's something you can see with your eyes objectively, or their disability is hidden, something that happened to them, they snapped or something. Homeless in the streets. No veterans, absolutely no veterans. People that are willing to fight to the death for you, your rights, your freedoms, should be in the streets. Never. Never. Just the fact that they joined and were willing to lay down their life for their countrymen. Just that act alone, man, says that person should never be homeless. They might have messed up during service. They might have disobeyed direct orders. They might have, who knows, they might have, endangered the lives of their fellow soldiers or something by some act of negligence or even deliberate act or something like that. But the fact that they signed up and were willing, at least at one point in their life, to lay down their life, to risk their life, for us, for their nation, for their countrymen, whether it's American soldiers or Chinese or whatever. Just the fact that they were willing to do that, even if it was the fact that they were born in a system that that shuffles them into either military service or slave wage jobs, or in other words, they don't give you much of a choice, eh? It's either fight to the death in their wars, or end up in prison if you're desperate enough to commit a crime just to try to survive. There's the options for the poor are not good. Now, people might say there's scholarships and and so on and so forth. I'm like, uh, not to toot my own horn and stuff, but in my in my in my entrance exam um, at the recruiting center, they said they'd have nobody ever that had ever gone into that particular recruiting center had ever even finished all the questions in time, let alone got them all right. And I finished them with time to spare, and they were all right. So they gave me another exam and said I could choose any MOS that I wanted. And I went into the Navy. I was in the Army Reserves first, and then I went regular Navy, choosing to be a nuclear electronics technician. Um, Highly specialized field and good pay, whether you're working for the government or not. I just wanted something financially secure, and since I had the aptitude to learn just about anything, my point being is, just because you have abilities, talents, if you're poor, man, even scholarships, man, are targeted towards minorities. In America, if you're white poor, um, try to look at how many scholarships are targeted for your ethnicity. They just aren't any. So you have to find all of them that are for your merits. And even though I had them, even though I had merits, when I was going into college, the internet was still very young. So to find scholarships meant through going through volumes at the library, and I did. I went through stacks. And when you go through, I don't know, tens of thousands, and again, you wouldn't hardly believe that there's that many scholarships available, but there are tens of thousands of them. But when they're all targeted for women or for whatever minorities, and none of them just for the majority, virtually. In other words, the white American male has been, I mean, as far as I can tell, been getting reverse discrimination worse and worse and worse and worse and worse throughout my lifetime. To the point, even if you had high qualifications, um, jobs and so on and so forth were given to people with lower qualifications that happen to fit whatever the pro rata for non-discrimination and equal opportunity and stuff. So I've been dealing with reverse discrimination for my entire life. And everybody always automatically assumes that you've lived some type of privileged life. It's like, that's not been my life. I was running away from home at age 11. I moved out of my parents' house either shortly after or shortly before my 15th birthday, never to return. So I have been the working poor, and I was working for wages when pushing lawnmowers when I had to reach up like that for the handle because I was so little. Foster system, given up for adoption, and again, it's because there are 1% of ultra wealthy people on the planet that can have hundreds of kids if they wanted them. They can afford to basically raise a whole nation of kids. They're so rich. Seriously, literally. In other words, they have more money than the entire gross domestic products of whole nations. They have more holdings and more wealth than the wealth of entire nations. Just 1% of the wealthiest people on earth. And these bankers have laid claim to real property interests, to corporate interests, to inventions, to innovations, and they basically, with again the exceptions of when the peasants revolt, these wealthy castes of families basically mold civilization. This is the way the real world works. And you're not taught this in schools, so somebody's got to say so. The wealthiest people on earth are the bankers. They own and control the World Bank. The World Bank issues credits to nations. The nations then have people slave for these wealthiest people to pay them back the interest that they fund your nation with. If your nation is not affiliated with the World Bank, or is opposed to the World Bank, or tries to in any way, shape, or form create its own currency and so on and so forth, the World Bank controls the militant might on earth, and then you're risking having the superpowers invade. Now the United States happens to be the militant arm. The World Bank, England, London, the financial arm, and then the Vatican, the religious arm, primarily of this three-city state. If you look at D.C. and London and the Vatican, they're like their own city-states, but these three city-states have the wealth of the world and the control of the world primarily. Not entirely, but primarily. And governments are more ruled by criminals like racketeering, like mafia and so on and so forth, than they are by honorable persons. Now, I'm not saying everywhere, but pretty much. The wealthiest people on earth make their own laws which enable them to run a racket on all the rest of us. Now, the racket in the United States is when the bankers took over, they created the Federal Reserve and the IRS pretty much hand in hand at the same time. In other words, the income tax was the way the bankers enslaved Americans, so that you pay them for just the privilege of working. Pays us protection instead. It's actually, if it was the mafia taking wages from taking your earnings right off the top, that would be obvious crime. But when the government does it, it's not. And the only reason the government does it is, again, the bankers took over the nation by the creation of the Federal Reserve. President Wilson signed it over. Franklin was right. Bankers are more dangerous than standing armies. America wasn't conquered by standing armies. It was conquered by the bankers. Everybody's paying them. You're paying them right off the top, man, tribute, in the form of the income tax. The income tax had never been legal or ratified or anything like that. It was just, again, something bankers implemented when they took over the nation. I don't know what they put on Wilson to get him to sign that Federal Reserve Act. And as far as I'm concerned, it was an act of treason. We the American people did not consent to have our income taxed. It just was implemented, and it was implemented forcefully against us. So our freedoms have been getting further and further eroded and trampled on by the bankers. In other words, the wealthiest people on earth. And again, they set up the whole system. It's all a racket. So if there's not enough of a slave labor market here in America, in other words, they can't get away because the Americans banded together and formed unions and so on and so forth and started fighting for their lives, then they enslaved the Chinese, where they've got entire cities of whole cities of one corporation, of factories for like square miles, where people are born into the factory. They're born into a slave system where they work there, they marry there, and they die there, right in the factory. Total slavery, modern slavery, man. Object modern slavery for sure. And they're given the illusion that they've got a little bit of cash where they can, but no time. Even if you have a little bit of money, you've got no time to spend it because you're working so hard. Otherwise, you don't have any money, and so you're working every waking moment anyways because you're trying to get some. It's all slavery. So it's an illusion that you lifelong have this opportunity to break into that upper crust, even in America. And some people work themselves to death trying to break out of poverty. I know, I was one of them. Almost made it, only to have my own wife try to kill me for the life insurance and what was then our estate. So greed is just so evil that it'll turn people to murder their own spouse, even a spouse that was practically killing himself to try to give her anything she wanted. So the bottom line is that to break out of poverty, you have to become a landowner at the very least. You have to either create your own business where you can charge your own wages based on the demand. You have to find some type of product or service based on the demand of whatever region you're living in, that you can charge something that is better than any wages that you can earn working for somebody else. In other words, it has to be worth it because it's hard work trying to establish your own business. I worked every waking moment for years, and there was just smarter ways to earn money. And you have to live below your means in order to save up enough to have that down payment, at least, that bankers will think, okay, well, they've got enough of their personal resources, time and energy vested in such and such property. I stand a really good chance of getting paid my principal and my usury. Bankers are in it for the money. So they will try to, with fees and with interest, make as much as they can on their money with minimal risk. The more the risk to them, the more fees and interest they want. If they consider, in other words, if you only have a little bit down, they consider that higher risk, so you pay higher fees and interest. The more money you have down, generally the lower you can of interest rates you can borrow and lower fees to get the rest of that purchase. But ideally, you live below your means until you have enough to buy your own land. Having your own land, especially land that will produce food, in other words, land that has access to water and will grow food, crops, is real wealth. Real wealth. So when the bankers who own the corporations will not pay wages that are sufficient for the poor to save up enough to get their own land, That is abject modern slavery. It's a system. It's racketed by them. It's racketeering, man, and extortion. Because the bankers work with the realtors, work with the landlords. They're all wealthy people. Real estate investors, bankers, landlords, CEOs, corporations, all of it are combined are a system that is crushing the rest of humanity. It would be liberating if they paid respectable wages, wages that are enough to live on. If after you either were injured in a war or by crime, didn't relegate you to below poverty level subsistence where you have to beg for your life. Seriously, if you become injured in war or disabled and unable to work in the system, and you're given $1,200 a month of insurance to survive on, you're begging somebody somewhere for help every month just to live. And if landlords move into your area and jack housing costs on you, then you're left looking sometimes out of the whole country trying to find someplace to live. And every time rich people displace poor people, then those poor people displace other poor people when they have to move. And eventually, at the very bottom of that, some poor person is kicked out into the streets to die of exposure prematurely. That's why affordable housing has to become a right for everybody lifelong. That's why we can't let bankers anymore run this racket on us. In other words, we can't let the wealthy get away with this crap anymore. They are extorting us, enslaving us, crushing us, maltreating us, bullying us, pushing us around our entire lives. They're dictating wages to us. We don't get to negotiate our wages. And then they're dictating housing costs, in other words, whether or not you can buy or own anything. And then when you can't, they're libeling you through their credit rating system. What a racket. They're getting away with slander, libel, attacks on mass millions of innocent lives by their control of the entire banking system and their control of politics and laws. Landlord-tenant laws, just if you take a look at landlord-tenant laws, you will realize that there is no way tenants have equal rights in this country or anywhere on earth compared to landlords. No way. In other words, they've created a system where property rights and the pursuit of money is more important than lives. And that's evident by people dying in the streets. So they are, in fact, not just people getting away with extortion and theft. Um, if you don't think so, if you don't pay your rent, our mercenaries, in the form of police powers, come knocking on your door and drag you out forcefully. And your possessions are automatically taken over by the landlord. Now, most landlords are wealthy, so they don't want the poor peasants pitting crap anyways. For them, it's just a burden that they throw in the trash, for the most part, but not always. Sometimes people, elderly and disabled, were forced to move under duress, and they might have had heirlooms, family heirlooms, something passed down to them for generations, or they might have, in their own lifetime, they might have accumulated some nice stuff, some electronics or things, stuff like that. Well, the landlords are just given right to. This is how much of a racket it is. A landlord can buy your building, double your rent from 1 month to the next, and if you can't pay it, and then take all your stuff and sell it under the law as their way of supposedly recuperating their losses from your inability to pay their greedy demands. Same thing with self-storage. You store personal possessions in a self-storage unit and you don't pay them, they can auction that stuff off. Same thing with moving and storage, relocation, commercial and residential household goods. So basically, the pursuit of money supersedes the right to life in our country. And why is that? Certainly not because poor people are making the laws. It's because the richest people on earth are making the laws, and they are greedy, unbelievably greedy. They're living in palaces. They've laid claim to God's green earth as their own. They claim to own the world. They've got a note and a deed for every little square inch of the planet. And they hold it, and you only get it on the pretext that you're going to pay them tribute even after you pay them every single penny they wanted for it in the first place, plus usury, which often results in double to triple or even quadruple what the property was actually worth to begin with. And then you're still going to pay them tribute in the form of property taxes, which if you can't pay, they turn around and seize without having to give you even one penny of the sales. That's your entire life's earnings and savings there, folks. Why are there not laws that says if a bank forecloses for any reason and sells the property, that they have to give you at least a percentage of the interest and ownership of how much you own? If you own the whole thing and they force a sale on you because of taxes, you should still get the proceeds from the sale minus the taxes. How about this racket? The rich, they not only are creating the money that everybody else works for out of thin air, but as a result of wealth creation for themselves, they own all the utilities and basically government, police powers. They own it all, folks. Pretty much. Now, I'm not consenting to that. I'm just saying that this is the world under their making as it is today. And you're born in a system that you are completely enslaved in from birth. And that's why my happiest places were on mountaintops far away from humanity when I was young enough to still run up and down the mountains. Now, it's not that I don't like certain amenities and improvements of so-called civilization. I do. But I'm saying the system is definitely fixed by criminals. Criminals of the worst kind, the most greedy and selfish people on earth. And it's only going to change when enough of you unite and make it change. Make them change the laws so that you are protected. So that you're not maltreated your entire life and at the end of your life kicked out into the streets to suffer and die. Affordable housing lifelong is an absolute right. Retirement communities for everybody, not just the rich. The poor get just as disabled as the rich do, by aging. But the poor, man, either dying in the street or dying at home alone or something like that. Some of them wishing they could blow their head off or something for the amount of pain and suffering because they're trying desperately just to fend for themselves when they just can't anymore. It's depressing, folks. It's extremely depressing if you don't have anybody, not friend, not family, nobody to help you. It's crushing. And not help you in the way you want to be helped, right? There's hospice generally, well, they'll charge Medicare, but you don't get the same type of end-of-life choices that the rich do. No, you don't. In other words, you might be in such severe pain that you require expensive pain medication, but if they give you any pain relieving substances, it isn't the stuff the wealthy get. In other words, you do not enjoy the same type of comfort and care in your end of life struggles. Hell, far as I can tell, the pets of the rich get treated better than the poor masses do. Um, their pets get put to sleep compassionately, quickly. Their pain is over like that. And people that are alive and healthy think that it's a terrible thing to talk about going to sleep. In other words, putting somebody down out of their misery, folks, for lack of a better phrase. I'm not a proponent for euthanization, don't get me wrong, but I am absolutely a proponent for patients to make their own choice in that regard and not have anybody interfere one way or the other in that regard. Now, I'm not saying other people can't pray for them, and if they think that somebody's doing something wrong by electing sedative palliative care, pray for their soul or whatever. But I'm saying let them make the choice regardless, because unless you're a true empath, you have no idea what he or she is going through in their final moments. Some people suffer so bad, man, it's hard to imagine hell being any worse. They're struggling for every breath they take. They're in unbearable pain. Pain so great that if they had the strength, they'd be screaming at the top of their lungs pain. Every waking moment with no relief. Some of them have been suffering that intensely for months to years, maybe even more than a decade. And they just were desperate trying to find some way to either get pain relief or to stay alive or to miraculously recover good health, only to realize that they are now even more aged and suffering even worse than what was unbearable to them even a decade earlier. And they get to a point where they're just, if they know the Lord, they're saying, Lord, have mercy. Every thought of every second, they're asking God to have mercy on their soul, because it feels like something like I said, something like pure hell for them. Or for some reason, God is allowing, I don't know, if you want to call it the devil, devils, evil, whatever you want to call it, the pain of death to be overwhelming for those people. Now, I'm not trying to say that everybody suffers that badly. I'm trying to let you know that some people do. And to not allow them sedative palliative care, if that's what they want, is cruel. You are prolonging their agony and suffering. If you actually think they're going to go to hell for sedating themselves to death, pray for them. Seriously, pray for them. Maybe in their final thought they're saying, God forgive me or something, but I just can't. I'm unwilling to endure this any longer, type thing. I look at it this way. I look at everything that we endure in this so-called reality as blessings, cursings, trials, tribulations, and whatever, comforts. In other words, there's good, there's evil, and everything in between. And we come to a point at the end of our journey where hopefully we have made our peace with our Creator already by receiving our Lord Jesus Christ and being grateful for His immense suffering. in our behalf on the cross. But nonetheless, um, the soul that sins dies, and we all bear a certain amount of consequences, and or sometimes it's just maltreatment from other people in our dying moments. And some people were martyred, burned alive type thing. I'm just saying, I don't want to be any of those people. But at the same time, I want to rejoice with them in heaven. In other words, who wants to suffer? Um, some people maybe there's a few people out there that would like to be a martyr or something. Um, Typically, the martyrs were severely maltreated in their dying moments, um, like God was. Um, there's something about drawing close to Him that we share in His, I don't know, in His persecution, in His maltreatment, in His suffering, and in His death. The closer you draw to Him, but it is not pleasant, folks. It's not something that you should crave. I don't crave it. I want to be. I want to be so close to God. I want to be right there with Him for all eternity. That close. In other words, I've been blessed to have visits to paradise, but there's nothing in all creation as great, as glorious, as wonderful, as magnificent, as virtuous as our eternal Creator. And even though His Holy Spirit is throughout all of paradise, and you can never be apart from God once you're there, He's in you and in everything. He's always with you, and tangibly so. In other words, you are fully aware God is with you and everyone and everything in all His creation. But still, being right in His presence, right in His visible presence, the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ. There's just nothing better. Just isn't. I don't want to be that close, but I don't want to suffer anymore down here. So I'm a proponent. Um, if it violates your own conscience, then don't do it. But if you, like me, believe that God isn't going to say you didn't suffer enough in your dying moments, so you can't go to paradise, like I just don't believe He will ever say that to anybody. Uh, Other people, had compassion on you for your suffering and let you go to sleep. I don't know. Who knows? You might have lived another day, maybe another month even, of just gasping for breath, but unable to feed yourself, unable to clothe yourself, unable to speak, unable to even make it to the toilet on your own power. You're urinating and defecating on yourself. You're lying there. You can't even roll over. You can't even lift a finger. You're dying. If you're that incapacitated and you had a living will that says, if I get to such a stage like that, then please, man, uh, for me, for me, I don't even want to get to that level of disability. Um, for me, if I can't feed myself, clothe myself, and make it to the toilet on my own strength, even if I can still move, but if I can't function at a level where I can sustain my own life, I want a lethal injection of morphine. And if you want to follow it up with Seconal or some other drug that makes sure I don't wake up, just as long as but by injection, I want an IV in my arm, an electronic injector full of enough morphine and Seconal to put an elephant to sleep. In other words, if I push that button, I don't want to wake up. An electronic injector, you just tell me, hey, it's what you asked for. This is a lethal dose of morphine. All you got to do is push this button. So it's on my own volition. It's not on anybody else. But people that understand that there is nothing left in your dying moments but your thoughts between you and God. And if you've already made your peace with Him, and all that's left for you down here is to suffer and die, I look at it as like a test on all the rest of us. Are we going to let our brothers and sisters go through pure hell when we have the means to give them compassionate end-of-life care, where they're not in unbearable pain and suffering, where they can transition from this life to the next one in relative ease and comfort, comparatively so? Or are we going to sit there and watch them gasp for every breath in agony? In other words, there's been times in the past, like, say, Masada, for example, where people were looking at being able to live as a slave, oppressed, possibly tortured, raped, maltreated, who knows what. They considered death preferable. Do those people get punished by God for ending their life and the lives of their children to escape a lifelong abuse of slavery, maltreatment, so on and so forth? In other words, a life of suffering. Because that's what you're talking about at the end of life stage. All that's left is suffering. If a person has made their peace with our eternal Creator and has, if they have loved ones, said their goodbyes, or basically, I'll see you when I see you. I'll see you when you get to heaven. In other words, it's not a permanent goodbye, but it's just a temporary one. I just cannot see our eternal Creator saying, you don't get to go to heaven because you didn't suffer enough in your dying moments. You elected sedative palliative care instead. Can you see Jesus Christ saying that to people? I can't. I've stood in His presence and looked Him eye to eye, straight in His face, like this close. And He's nothing but good. Nothing but love. Nothing but. Now, the Holy Bible makes it clear that He's going to cast the devil and all evil people like him into the lake of fire. And who understands what that even means? I have never met anybody that fully understands, fully comprehends. I've read instances of people that supposedly had tours into hell and stuff, of even life and death experiences of people in hell, and there's no way I'm going to call those people liars. The Bible talks about hell, talks about a lake of fire. When I died, I went to outer darkness, so I personally know outer darkness is a very real place, and it's a place you don't want to go. But I also know paradise is a very real place. I've been blessed with visits there. I know it's a very real creation of our eternal Creator. I can't point to it and say that it's even in this universe. I think it's somewhere outside of what we consider the universe. And again, our universe is only limited by what we've been able to visibly observe to date. Now, Hugh Ross says we've observed the beginning of the universe when it was just a conglomeration of light and mass. He says that through optics, they've looked that far back, 14 point whatever, 5, 6, 7 billion years ago, something like that, based on the current speed of light, etc., etc. Now, I don't know if they have or not because I've never seen those things. But Hugh Ross says he has, and I'm not calling that man a liar either. I'm just saying that we only know as much as what we've been able to observe or have been told by divine revelation. And even then, all the rest of us are still subject to the fact that's filtered through fallible mortal beings for the most part. And that the only things we can be absolutely sure of are the things we have directly received from the one who does not lie, our eternal creator, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I have seen him in paradise, and I want to be there. It's so much better than here. It's so much better than even the mountains that I love. Everything there is so awesome. But in the meantime, I want to encourage people to not to have to, I don't know, get to a point where things are so bad where you have to fight for your lives forcefully all over again. It's just when if you would just simply unite and agree, you could have a better quality of life for yourselves. Yes, you could. But you have to unite and agree and stop letting them manipulate you through their control of the mainstream media. In other words, even though you've paid for your education may or may not be sound knowledge. If it has led you away from the God who has declared himself in the Holy Bible, then whatever is in your head is not sound knowledge. Sound knowledge, in other words, truthful information, leads to him who is truth. And that's our Lord Jesus Christ. Anything that leads away from knowing our eternal Creator, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, is not truthful information. It's a lie and a deception. Straight up. It's not factual knowledge. It's somebody's vain opinion. It's imagination. It's a falsehood. It's deceit. And that's religion or otherwise, cult or otherwise, whether it's called science or not. If it leads to him, factually true, comes from the one who is truth. If it leads away from him, in other words, if whatever you've put in your mind is somehow preventing you from calling upon and knowing our eternal Creator, then you need to get rid of that. And I did. It happened in a twofold stage. It happened with my sincere prayer that if he would let me know him, I would serve him now and forever. And then he did. He removed all doubt. He appeared to me. Okay. Now I'm not saying he's going to do that for everybody, but that's my testimony. That's what happened to me, and it was a matter of life and death. And God had mercy on my soul and revealed himself to me. But now, and I can't keep the vow in my own strength. That's another thing I've realized. We can't serve God in what we imagine as our own power and strength. We only have whatever semblance of life or power or abilities as he imparts to us. And then we get no more. In other words, we might imagine, like at one time I was imagining, Well, if nobody else will help me arrest, mass murdering doctors and nurses and sex offending police, I'll have to do it all myself. And then my health failed so much, man, and wealth, that I didn't have a vehicle. I couldn't even remember how to, even though I once had the knowledge of how to track all these people down, I lost all that, the ability to do so, the knowledge. It was all taken from me. It's like God's like, no, son, that's not what you're going to do. I'm like, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I lost the ability to do it. I don't have transportation. I don't have intel. I don't have weapons. I don't have the health strength to track all these people down and forcefully arrest them, forcefully stop them. So they're all still loose, and mainly because I couldn't succeed in persuading any of the so-called powers that be, police powers and everything, to investigate and make the arrests in my behalf, even though I was a citizen testifying that I witnessed these events firsthand and survived them firsthand, and I have medical records to prove it. And they wouldn't investigate or make arrests. And when other police actually committed more crimes against me instead of helping me, that made it even worse. So then I couldn't find any higher powers or authorities that would help me arrest them. So, too much corruption and too much evil in this world. And that's why God tells us to forgive everyone and everything, because that includes us. None of us are perfect. And if you think somebody deserves, the flames of damnation, there's probably somebody out there that thinks you do. In other words, you just have to turn it all over to Him and realize that He really does have all power and all authority, and that if He wants, mass murdering doctors and nurses stopped on planet Earth, it's going to happen. But if for some reason He's letting those people be loose, you might shout and scream for justice, but you'll do it in vain. I was just trying to do my part, just to make sure other people weren't injured by the same people that attacked me. But because I was so injured, I just couldn't do it myself. I couldn't stop these people myself. So I'm sorry for that. I prayed, and I suppose if God wanted me to hunt these people down myself, I would have gotten some means to be able to do that, but it never happened. And now I'm just like tired. I'm just tired of. And I'm not saying I've met all kinds of really good people. I'm not saying everybody all the time is doing horrible, horrific, evil things. If that was the case, the world would already be burning in flames. But I'm just saying to all the good people, I'm saying if you want to make sure that you live in a world that is a better one, then you have to tell everybody, one, that they can know our eternal Creator and must know Him in order to have the virtues that come from Him with them their whole lives, so that they might not be perfect, but they yearn to be, and they're striving for it. In other words, knowing God and having God in our lives does make us better people, absolutely. Some people I've heard say that they're good without God, and I'm like, yeah, I have yet to see any evidence in that regard. Instead, I've seen the evidence quite the opposite. That people that imagine they're good without God are some of the worst people I've ever encountered, typically. In other words, we're not good without God. No, we're not. Not even our wildest imaginations, not even close. We don't even know what good is until we know God. We think we do, but no, we don't. If everybody knew what good is, there wouldn't be entire cults of pedophiles. Do you understand? They think in their cult, they actually venerate, a rapist, a slaver, a robber, a murderer, or if they're still in that cult and they don't realize that their cult leader was a rapist, a pedophile, a robber, a murderer, a slaver, then they actually replace him, the historic cult leader, with an idol of their own imagination, as being something akin to something that whatever it is that they imagine is good for the moment. But again, if you don't know God, you don't know what good is. If you don't know God, you don't know what love is. So all these people that talk about good and love and right and wrong but don't know God, don't know what they're talking about. And those of us who do know that. Now, I say such things not to try to offend anybody, just because it's a truth. It's a flat out truth. God is good and God is love. And if you don't know God, you don't know what good is or what love is. And the whole world is suffering because of it. In other words, if you want the world to be a better place, everybody's got to know God. You got to call on the Lord Jesus Christ and get His Holy Spirit in your life, and that will radically improve conditions on earth. Until then, if you're going to leave the greediest, most selfish people in the world in power, the poor masses, have to unite against them and let them know that you are not going to put up with slave wages and their disdain maltreatment any longer. The easiest way for people in general to be free of their system is to make their money of no value. In other words, just go back to barter and trading. See, if they've made laws, right? If you try to create your own currency, you're on any authority other than theirs, that's illegal. Securities, treasury violations, and so on and so forth. But they can't prevent people from trading goods and services. They might try. But again, when are you going to realize that God's green earth does not belong only to a handful of people? And the fact that they think it does makes them all your enemies. In other words, for them to lay claim to the land, the food, the air, the water, the planet, for any few individuals to lay claim to it all, means that in their opinion you are trespassing. You're a slave. You don't have any rights. They're the private landowners. They're the landlords of the planet. Everybody else is living on it at their mercy. Now they know that they can't get even their hired mercenaries to be quite as evil as they would like to be. So that's why they're investing in technologies that does away with with human beings altogether, and is just able to deal out death and destruction um, at their request and bequest, because they don't want to have anybody with a conscience interfering in their diabolical plans. But anybody trying to lay claim to the whole planet is definitely acting like the devil. So the wealthiest most selfish and greedy people on the planet are, are acting just like the devil. The devil tries to take the place of God, and God is the creator, and creation belongs to Him. That includes planet Earth and His children, and that's everyone. So there shouldn't be just a few people living in palaces that claim that they own everything on the planet, and all the rest of us begging, for scraps from them. That's not how it should be. And until the rest of humanity unseats them, in other words, comes to your senses and stops their racket of them not only creating money out of thin air that everybody else works for, but creating laws that favor only them and their greedy minions, and crush the rest of us. Until you demand equal rights, that means everybody has the absolute right to affordable housing, lifelong. Some people are good at land management. In other words, growing crops, farming, gardening, so on and so forth. For those people to be born into a system of poverty where they can never do so is not right. To only have 1% of the entire population participating in food production is not right. In other words, conglomerates of mega corporations, corporate-owned farms owning tens of thousands of acres where they grow all the food en masse. Not right. Mankind as a whole was instructed by God Almighty to be tending the earth in that regard. In other words, we all should be participating in crop production, planting fruit and nut trees for our generation and those to come. In other words, mankind as a whole needs to be involved in agriculture, not just a small percentage. In other words, needs to be involved in actually raising crops, growing food, and preserving heirloom biodiverse crops worldwide instead of corporate monocultures, especially modified monocultures, genetically modified monocultures. That should not be going on at all. So we have an entire system ruled by criminals that are making all the rules that all the rest of us are born into their system. And if you don't think landlords are getting away with crimes against humanity, put yourself on the receiving end of having somebody walk up to you in your house, in your current living quarters, and doubling the expense, tripling the expense, or whatever. Anything that's beyond your means to pay, you just can't pay it. And they're telling you that you've got to move within whatever, a week, 30 days. Short-term notice. You gotta vacate your home, and you don't know where you're gonna go. What's worse than that is trying to imagine that you don't have any savings, like half of Americans, and you're being evicted, and you're being forced to move. And what's worse than that is, because you're going through the eviction process, other landlords look at your credit report and then think that you're a high risk, so they charge you a higher deposit when you don't have any savings to begin with. If they even accept your application. So you can end up homeless through no fault of your own, but just because some greedy landlord makes a financial demand upon you which you cannot pay. And then you could suffer the rest of your natural life because of their system of denigrating you just because you were attacked by somebody so greedy and cruel. In other words, the real criminal, the real person at fault, the one that should be suffering consequences is the landlord, not their poor tenants that are being driven from place to place or into the streets. Landlords are getting away with crimes, flat out: extortion, theft, even homicide. It's a proven fact that if you're homeless, you die prematurely from exposure. Pretty much. In other words, you die far sooner than the average lifespan if you're homeless. There might be, if you see an elderly homeless person, they're probably recently homeless, or if they've been homeless a long time, they've learned ways to survive, where they get out of the elements when it's really bad somehow. Squats, shelters, some type of assistance. Even if they have to go to jail for a while, those are survivors. But at the same time, they still die. Even those people still die prematurely compared to the housed populace. The homeless are at risk for premature death. So landlords creating homeless people by raising rents. Landlords raising rents on the elderly and disabled are absolute crimes against humanity. They know they cannot pay their rent demands. They are attacking those people. Those are overt attacks on their lives. And just because our society has allowed them to get away with it for any period of time doesn't make it right. Unite, and since you had to fight for labor laws, in other words, better wages, apparently you've got to fight in order to keep the cost of housing affordable. Or that's another area that they're just crushing you at. So you need more than fair wages, folks. You need regulation on things that are life sustaining, and housing is a substantial part of sustaining life on the planet. In other words, shelter from the elements. So affordable housing is a right lifelong, or you're letting rich people crush you to death. If you don't think that they're actual criminals, read laws across the nation on extortion, on theft, on armed robbery. I mean, and look at the eviction process, what it entails. You have people armed with weapons dragging poor people, the elderly, the disabled, the working poor, out of their homes, depriving them of their personal possessions, and all because they could not meet the demand for money made by a landlord at their whim. Armed robbery is being committed. Um, Assault is being committed. Extortion is being committed. And when you put somebody on the streets to bear the elements, especially if they're elderly or disabled, that's an absolute attack on their lives. So homicide is being committed. Landlords are serious criminals at this point. We've got to do away with them. No more landlords. Only way to rectify the problem: affordable housing is a right for everybody lifelong. No more bankers getting away with foreclosing on people, and no more government taking people's homes for non-payment of property taxes when they become aged, elderly, and disabled. We have to protect citizens from government, from bankers, from landlords. Thank you.